Hey guys, tonight we're boarding a creaky medieval ship for a long, uncomfortable voyage through history. You're standing on the edge of a splintery dock at sunrise. The fog rolls in thick and wet, your boots already soaked through. In front of you looms your ride, a bulky wooden cog, rigged with one sad square sail and a prayer. It groans like it resents your presence already. The air stinks of fish tar and stale sweat. Sailors shout things you don't understand, and none of them seem glad to see you. This isn't some polished Disney vessel, it's the Middle Ages, and you're about to find out just how unpleasantly real that can get. You probably won't survive this, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always love seeing how far this sleepy little fleet travels. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The rope ladder sways as you climb aboard. It's sticky from something you hope is just salt water. The deck beneath your feet is slick and uneven, smelling of mold and misery. Welcome aboard. The cog you're on is about 60 feet long with a single mast and a few dozen sailors who all look like they'd fight a seagull for a crust of bread. The crew eyes you sideways. They can already tell you're not built for this. There's no grand ceremony for departure. Someone yells. Someone else spits into the sea, and just like that, you're off. The port slips away behind you as the cog creaks and lunges forward, pulled by a half-hearted gust. The sail flaps lazily overhead, barely doing its job like a teenager forced to mow the lawn. You're in the North Sea, which isn't exactly the Caribbean. The wind cuts through your layers like you're wearing a toga made of paper. And the cold. It's the sort that settles in your bones like it's paying rent. You shiver next to a barrel that leaks something brown and suspicious. A nearby sailor grins with only half his teeth. Gets better after the first week, he says. Maybe. The horizon stretches endlessly, a wet smear of gray and gloom. The ship rocks gently for now, and you can already feel the nausea tickling the back of your throat. But you're trying to stay optimistic. You brought socks. You'll be fine, right? The truth is, this isn't a vessel made for comfort. It's made for transporting cargo, mostly wool grain or cheap wine, and a few brave, red, desperate passengers. If you're lucky, you won't have to sleep on the cargo. If you're really lucky, the cargo won't be leaking. Historians still argue whether medieval ships were ever truly built with passengers in mind, or if people just wedged themselves between the goats and hoped for the best. As you wander, you pass the tiller, a giant wooden lever controlled by the helmsman, who looks like he hasn't blinked in 3 days. There's no wheel. That's a luxury for ships that haven't been invented yet. Here, steering is more of a hopeful suggestion to the sea. He grunts when you get too close. You're already in someone's way. You find your assigned sleeping area, which is generous considering it's a stretch of deck beneath some netting. The crew sleeps wherever they drop, and if you're not careful, that might be on top of you. There's no cabin. No mattress. Just boards and maybe a wool blanket if you bribe the quartermaster with something valuable like a fresh onion or news from land. Below deck, it's worse. Dark, hot, and smells like a compost heap that gave up. It's where the rats live, and the cargo, and maybe if things go south, you... But don't worry, you'll get there soon enough. You lean over the railing and glance at the churning water. It's dark and thick, like it's been stewing for centuries. You suddenly remember that swimming isn't really a thing people know how to do yet. If you fall overboard, the best case scenario is someone tries to fish you out with a pole. The worst case, they don't even notice you're gone until your boots float back. And that's just day one. One curious thing you notice is a small shrine at the base of the mast, just a candle and a carved token of Saint Nicholas Patron, Saint of Sailors. Someone's even left a fish head as an offering. You try not to look too closely. Religious rituals on board are common, mostly because everything else on the ship is out of your control. You can't control the wind, the waves, or the captain's mood, but maybe you can light a candle and avoid getting eaten by a sea serpent. Yes, that's a real concern. Sea monsters aren't just bedtime stories here. Mariners share tales of giant tentacles, ghost ships, and islands that turn out to be sleeping whales. You chuckle until you realize no one else is laughing. In fact, one sailor is scratching a crude kraken onto the mast with a rusty nail. As the sun climbs, things warm up slightly. But you've got to keep your eyes peeled because navigating medieval seas is a lot like road tripping, without GPS road signs or even roads. The captain might be using the sun, the stars, and maybe a compass if he's fancy, but mostly he's relying on experience, oral maps, and a gut feeling that's only been wrong twice, maybe three times. As the light fades and the wind shifts, your stomach does another backflip. You decide to sit down, which is hard because there are exactly zero comfortable surfaces. Your best bet is to wedge yourself between two barrels and hope you don't fall asleep directly in someone's vomit. The sun sets in streaks of orange and purple, casting long shadows across the creaking deck. The air cools again, sharp and salty. You try to appreciate the beauty of it all, but then a gull poops directly into your sleeve. Welcome to Maritime Life, friend. You wake up to the sound of someone coughing hard enough to dislodge a lung. It's still dark, though a faint gray light filters in through the gaps between the deck boards above you. At first you're confused. Why is your face wet? Why is everything wet? Oh, right, you're on a medieval ship. And the concept of dry is now a distant memory. Your sleeping arrangement, if it can be called that, has not improved. You're curled in a corner between a rope coil and a crate of pickled fish, the latter of which has leaked something briny and aggressively scented all over your cloak. The floor beneath you is slimy. Something just skittered past your foot, but you're too tired to scream. It turns out personal space is a luxury you left on the dock. There's no such thing as a private bunk or cozy quarters here. If you're a common sailor or a poor passenger like you sleep where there's room. If the ship's crowded, that might mean sharing a hammock with someone else. Top and tailing isn't just a charming Victorian phrase, it's a desperate attempt to avoid foot-to-face contact at sea. You do eventually find a hammock, but it's already occupied by a man who's snoring with such commitment that his whole body lifts slightly with each inhale. You consider waking him, but he has a knife strapped to his boot, and you're not in the mood for a duel. So you opt instead for a bit of deck space directly beneath a leaking water barrel. Hydration by osmosis. As the ship rocks, so do you. It's not a soothing sway, it's the kind of motion that throws off your sense of gravity and makes you question your life choices. Every creak of timber sounds like a prelude to collapse. The ropes overhead groan like they're struggling under the weight of the sky. And then there's the noise. People imagine the sea as peaceful, but medieval ships are anything but quiet. Above deck, men shout and curse and sing badly. Below, rats scurry cargo shifts and a child cries for their mother, possibly a goat, but you're not sure anymore. Sleep is elusive. Peace is mythical. Your neighbors don't help. One man beside you spends the night grinding his teeth. Another mutters in his sleep. Probably curses, though it's hard to say. A third laughs at nothing. You're starting to think this might be the beginning of a medieval horror movie. You shift slightly and immediately regret it. Something crunchy was under you. You check. It's a fish spine. Naturally, you try to distract yourself by staring at the low ceiling, which is really just the bottom of the upper deck. It's covered in soot grime, and something sticky you're not brave enough to identify. A spider dangles lazily overhead as if it's judging you. Eventually, daylight returns. The ship's bell clangs, signaling the start of the watch, and just like that, the deck above erupts into life. Boots pound overhead. Someone yells "haul," and something heavy crashes to the floor. You realize with a sinking heart that this noise will continue all day and into the night. There's no privacy, none. Everyone dresses, undresses, and relieves themselves within arm's reach of one another. If you're shy, the Middle Ages will beat that out of you by Thursday. At best, you get to change your shirt behind a hanging scrap of canvas. At worst, you just accept that your dignity is now property of the crew. One sailor leans over you and grunts. Nice snoring. You weren't snoring. At least you don't think you were. Then again, it's hard to keep track of your body when you've barely slept and the ship feels like it's trying to throw you off like a bad idea. By now, your skin feels sticky and your clothes are damp, not just from the misty sea air, but from other people's proximity. There's a general smell on the ship, a musk of wet wool, sour breath tar, and old fish. It's inescapable. It clings to your skin, your hair, even your thoughts. Historians still argue whether the lack of hygiene on medieval ships was entirely due to necessity or partly from indifference. Water was precious and mostly reserved for drinking, or at least less toxic beverages. Soap. That's a shore luxury. Baths laughable. Some captains even forbade washing on board, fearing it would make the wood slippery or the men sick. Because logic. You crawl topside blinking against the watery light. The wind is sharp, the salt air bracing. You feel momentarily cleaner, but only because the wind is trying to exfoliate you down to bone. A gull watches you from the rigging head, cocked. You don't trust it. You glance back down the hatch. A man with a pockmarked face is helping another tie off a bandage made of what appears to be a torn shirt and moss. There's blood. No one seems concerned. You try to find somewhere to sit, somewhere private. You fail. The deck is crowded with sailors coiling ropes, checking sails, and arguing in a blend of Middle English and grunts. You find a spot near the bow next to a pile of netting that smells like it once met a fish and lost the encounter. As you settle in, you overhear a story. A sailor describes a voyage where a man was caught hoarding dried apples and forced to sleep in the rigging as punishment. Another nods solemnly and adds, could have been worse. Last time someone tried that, he ended up keel-hauled. You nod like you understand. You don't. You will later, and it's not great. One of the older sailors hands you a cup of something warm. It's brown, it's steaming, and it tastes like boiled regret. Posset, he says. Puts hair on your teeth. You nod politely and wonder how to politely pour it into the sea without offending the ship's cook. Later that day, you try to nap again. This time you hang a bit of cloth like a curtain hoping for privacy. You almost fall asleep until someone accidentally drops a coil of rope on your ankle and mumbles, sorry, like it's your fault. But here's the odd thing you're starting to adjust. Your nose has stopped noticing the smells. Your ears have learned to filter the shouting. Your body has accepted the fact that hammocks are just medieval torture devices disguised as beds. You're evolving or breaking. It's hard to tell the difference anymore. You're jolted awake by a sudden shift in the ship's motion. Not the gentle sway you've begrudgingly come to accept, but something sharper. The cog lurches sideways, and for a terrifying moment, you're sure it's rolling over like a sad turtle. A chorus of groans and curses rises from below deck. Someone's chamber pot is definitely tipped. You don't even want to imagine the splash radius. Storm's brewing. You scramble to your feet, or try to. The deck pitches again, and you land unceremoniously on your backside beside a chicken that looks just as panicked as you feel. The wind has changed, and so has the mood of the crew. Gone are the sleepy, half-interested expressions. Now they're taut focused like men who know exactly how badly this could go. The sky darkens quickly, the clouds rolling in with the enthusiasm of unpaid taxes. You glance out over the horizon, just gray on gray. No land, no hope. Just a growing wall of waves that seem way too tall for a boat that leaks when someone sneezes too hard. The captain yells something incomprehensible, probably medieval sailor, for, we're doomed, but let's do it in style, and the crew springs into action. Sails are reefed ropes, hauled buckets positioned strategically. One sailor hands you a coil of rope and points vaguely toward the mast. Hold it. You do, mostly because dropping it feels like tempting fate. Historians still argue whether medieval sailors were well-trained professionals or just desperate men winging it with rope and superstition. Judging by the chaos around you, it might be a little of both. The wind hits like a slap, sharp and cold. Rain starts as a drizzle, but quickly upgrades to an assault. It lashes your face, soaks through your cloak, and turns the deck into a slip and slide of doom. Thunder growls overhead. Lightning forks across the sky, and every man on board looks upward with a mixture of awe and sheer panic. You're too wet to be afraid anymore. You're just resigned. Then comes the first wave. A real one. Not a splash, but a towering wall of water that crashes over the side like the sea trying to reclaim its favorite toy. You're knocked sideways. The rope you were holding turns out to be less helpful than advertised. You sprawl across the deck, scraping your elbow and tasting salt water that may or may not include someone's breakfast. You don't know how long it goes on. Time ceases to exist. There's just you, the ship, the storm, and the existential question of whether you've angered Poseidon. Sailors bark prayers between gritted teeth. One is yelling about St. Elmo's fire, a strange glow that sometimes appears on masts during electrical storms. It's real, by the way. Some called it a sign of protection, others saw it as a warning. You can't see any glowing right now, but you're mostly focused on not drowning. The cog creaks like it's reconsidering its career choices. Waves slam against the hull, and every time the ship dips, your stomach drops like you're on the world's most questionable roller coaster. The rigging above groans. A spar cracks. You close your eyes and cling to the railing like it owes you rent money. Then suddenly it stops. Or not stops exactly. The rain softens. The waves settle slightly. It's like the storm takes a breath. The crew doesn't relax, though. They know better. This is the eye. The break. A cruel little tease before round two. You use the moment to crawl toward a barrel wretch ungracefully into it and lie back panting. Every inch of you is soaked, shaking, and salt-burned. A sailor pats your shoulder and says, "First storm, eh?" You nod. He laughs. Wait till you get to your first sea battle. There's a brief moment of eerie calm, the kind where the only sounds are the creaking of wet wood and the distant roll of thunder, like a reminder that the sea's not done with you yet. One sailor starts humming a low, haunting tune. It's not comforting, but it's oddly fitting. A sort of funeral dirge for your dignity. You start to notice the small details that didn't register before. The way the ropes are worn in specific places, smoothed by generations of calloused hands. The talisman nailed to the mast, an old horseshoe wrapped in string and feathers. The deck planks stained with 100 unnamed spills. This ship has been through worse. Probably, maybe. Historians often debate how seaworthy these cogs really were. Some argue they were sturdy, slow beasts that could take a beating. Others think they were little more than driftwood with ambition. You're not convinced either way. All you know is that you haven't drowned yet, and that's a win in your book. You crawl back toward the hatch and descend shakily into the belly of the ship. The smell hits you like a wall-damp straw, unwashed bodies, and the unmistakable tang of spilled vinegar. Someone is trying to mop up the disaster area that used to be the galley, but mostly they're just smearing it around. You find your cloak somehow wetter than you remember and wrap it around yourself. It offers no warmth, but it feels like the right thing to do. You drift off in a seated position, head lolling against the hull, listening to the rain above and the occasional groan of a sailor's joints. It's not peaceful, but it's not terrifying either. That feels like progress. You're startled awake an hour later when a rat uses your leg as a ramp. Outside, the storm is truly passing. The sun peeks through golden and mocking. The sea glistens like nothing ever happened. A rainbow arches on the horizon, and one sailor salutes it with a crust of bread. Another slaps your back and grins, revealing a gap-toothed smile. Still alive, landlubber. Ship likes you. You're not so sure. But you climb to your feet, brush rat hair off your lap, and squint at the open sea with the vague realization that somehow this is your life now. Soggy, sleepless, and possibly cursed, but yours. And you know what? The rainbow's nice. For now. You've survived your first storm, sort of, and now you're hoping for a return to normalcy. Except there's nothing normal about day-to-day life on a medieval ship. You know those fantasy books where sailors spend their downtime swapping tales, strumming lutes, and gazing soulfully at the horizon? Yeah, no. On this floating splinter of doom, every moment not spent fighting nature is spent trying not to fall apart, physically, emotionally, and occasionally gastrointestinally. You're hungry, but mealtime is less of a fixed ritual and more of a chaotic suggestion. There's no galley in the modern sense. No one is frying eggs or flipping pancakes. Instead, you follow your nose to a pot suspended over a small fire pit lashed down near middeck. Yes, fire. On a wooden ship, while surrounded by ropes, tar, and dreams. What could go wrong? The cook, a man with one eye and no apparent sense of smell, ladles out something best described as gray. It's a stew allegedly made from salted meat, dried peas, and a spice you can't identify. Could be pepper, could be mildew. You eat it anyway because your stomach has filed multiple complaints already and is threatening a strike. The salted meat is chewy to the point of jaw fatigue. The hardtack, the ship's version of bread, is more weapon than food. You knock it on the side of the barrel and it echoes like a small gong. One sailor uses his to hammer a nail. Another recommends soaking it in your drink first. The drink, thin beer or possibly vinegar pretending to be wine. It's safer than water, which is ironic, given you're surrounded by it. Still, there's a strange comfort in eating with the crew. The conversation is sparse, mostly muttered complaints and the occasional belch, but it feels oddly communal. You're all suffering together like a very damp, very smelly family reunion. Historians still argue whether shipboard food was consistently bad due to poor preservation or just terrible taste. Some accounts mention decent meals on short trips, fresh fish bread, even cheese. But long voyages. That's when the nightmare pantry opened. Sailors joked about weevils as extra protein. You don't laugh. You're pretty sure something in your stew just winked at you. Mealtime ends when the pot is empty, not when you're full. You wash out your wooden bowl with seawater, which feels counterproductive, but it's the done thing. Then comes the real challenge: digestion, because the ship never stops moving. You try to lean against the railing, staring out at the undulating waves, willing your stomach to stay civil. It doesn't. The sea has a way of humbling even the proudest appetite. To distract yourself, you try striking up a conversation. The sailor next to you speaks in thick dialect, and you catch every third word. Something about Wales, a cousin who was cursed, and a woman named Bridget who may or may not be a witch. You nod politely and offer a vague, "ah," which seems to work. There's very little to do in your off hours. No cards, no books, no medieval Netflix. Some sailors pass the time with simple games dice mostly, or who can spit the farthest without falling over. One crewman is carving something from a chunk of driftwood. You ask what it is. He squints. A dragon. Or maybe a chicken. You admire it regardless. Others mend clothing, rewrap fraying rope, or sit silently staring into space like monks with chronic seasickness. Boredom sets in thick as fog. The only consistent entertainment is eavesdropping, and the stories range from wild exaggeration to truly baffling. One man claims he saw a sea monster the size of a chapel off the coast of Brittany. Another insists mermaids are real and make terrible wives. You're not sure if he's joking. You hope he's joking. Suddenly, a shout from the crow's nest cuts through the lull. "Sail ho!" The crew snaps to attention. You grab the railing, heart pounding. Could it be pirates rescue a merchant ship with chocolate and dry socks? It's just a fishing boat. The excitement fizzles. Still, everyone watches it drift by the way prisoners might watch a free man stroll past their cell. One sailor squints and mutters, "Lucky dog's probably got cheese," then spits over the side. With no true tasks assigned to you, you're given a job scraping barnacles off the hull during calm seas. The process involves dangling from the side of the ship like an extremely unqualified acrobat, wielding a metal scraper while muttering threats at the clingiest crustaceans alive. You get soaked, scratched, and mocked by passing gulls. One poops directly on your sleeve. You take it personally. Back on deck, you notice something strange. The water barrels are running low. You overhear a tense discussion between the captain and first mate. There's mention of rationing. You're not thrilled. Salted stew without drink is basically edible cruelty. Historians still argue whether rationing was always based on necessity or sometimes manipulated by captains, hoarding better supplies for officers. Some journals suggest clear favoritism. Others imply it was pure logistics. Either way, you're not in the favored group. You're in the try not to collapse group. As evening approaches, you help lower the sails, a process involving ropes, shouted orders, and near death by pulley. Your hands are raw, your arms ache, but the act feels good. Like you're contributing. Like you might be less useless than you thought. You collapse beside a coil of rope that now feels like your unofficial designated spot. Your cloak is still damp. Your socks are permanently offended. But you stare at the sky, the stars just beginning to blink into place above you. There's no moon tonight, just a velvet stretch of darkness and pinprick light. One sailor points at a bright cluster and tells you it's a good omen. Another says it means storms. They argue. You fall asleep mid-debate. And for once, sleep is deep. Maybe it's the exhaustion. Maybe your body has simply given up protesting. But for a few precious hours, you're adrift in dreams, dry ones. Until someone's elbow lands in your kidney, you wake up to the sound of muffled coughing and the unmistakable squelch of wet leather boots on damp wood. It's still dark, but there's a chill in the air now, one that seeps under your cloak and makes your joints ache like you've aged 30 years overnight. Your breath fogs faintly as you sit up your bag. Stiff, your legs numb, and your hair doing its best impression of driftwood. Morning, such as it is. Breakfast. Don't be silly, there's no breakfast in the comforting toast and orange juice sense. You get what's left from last night's stew reboiled to a near gelatinous state, or maybe a chunk of dried fish so salty it could stand in for sandpaper. The beer water is warmer now, which is worse somehow. You sip it anyway. The captain's voice booms from the stern. Today's the day you clean. Not you alone, of course, but everyone. It's scrub day, which sounds wholesome until you realize what you're scrubbing everything. Deck beams, barrels, you name it. Sanitation on a medieval ship was, shall we say, interpretive. If it looked filthy and smelled like old socks and despair, then congratulations, it's your job now. You're handed a rag and a bucket of seawater. Someone thoughtfully tosses in a lump of lye soap, harsh, gritty stuff that burns if you linger too long. You scrub the deck in the long strokes, trying not to inhale too deeply. The combined aroma of mildew, fish guts, old grease, and body odor is impressive in its intensity. A nearby sailor scratches his beard and casually flicks a louse. You pretend not to notice. And yet cleanliness mattered. Historians note that while hygiene wasn't up to modern standards, understatement of the year, many ships did schedule regular scrubbing. They had a disease spread like rumors. A single case of dysentery could turn the vessel into a floating plague house. Crews knew that a clean ship was a survivable ship even if their idea of clean included barnacle slime and mystery buckets. You pause to stretch your back and catch sight of something squirming beneath a coil of rope. Rat. Plump, smug, and entirely unfazed by your presence. You lock eyes. It blinks slowly and waddles off tail dragging like a challenge. Rats were a fact of life aboard ships. Not just tolerated, sometimes even unofficially named. One sailor insists his rat Alfred brings good luck. You're skeptical. Part of today's cleaning involves the hold. You descend into the gloom, nearly tumbling over a loose plank. Down here it's worse, darker, wetter rancor. This is where the real filth gathers: spoiled food, spilled oil, dead rodents. You slip on something unidentifiable and make a note to burn your shoes later. Someone gags. Another sailor mutters a prayer. You drag sacks aside, swat at flies, and try not to breathe too hard. You find an abandoned boot, a rusty hook, and something that might have been cheese 2 months ago. As you dump a pail of sludge overboard, you spot dolphins, trailing the ship, sleek shapes arcing through the waves. It's oddly comforting. A brief, beautiful distraction in a day full of grime. Back on deck, the midday sun appears a small mercy. You lay your cloak out to dry along with your socks, which now resemble overboiled noodles. Other sailors do the same. It looks like a medieval laundromat exploded. Someone starts singing a work tune low and rhythmic. You don't know the words, but you hum along. It passes the time. Cleaning also includes personal hygiene, which is a stretch. There are no showers, there's the sea, and that's about it. You're handed a rag and told to splash yourself decent. You lean over the side, scoop up cold seawater, and do your best. It stings. It's uncomfortable. But it helps a little. Then comes delousing. You didn't sign up for this. No one did. But lice fleas and their charming cousins are everywhere. You see sailors checking seams, scraping scalps, boiling tunics. One guy casually holds his shirt over a lantern flame to fry the invaders. Bold move. You take your outer garments below, hang them near the fire pit, and hope for the best. It's itchy work, but necessary. Historians still argue whether most sailors were constantly infested or just regularly uncomfortable. Some records suggest creative methods, rubbing vinegar into their hair, wearing tight linen undergarments to trap bugs, even smearing goose fat. Don't ask. You for now go with the don't think about it too hard strategy. As the sun lowers, you notice the change in air. Fresher, lighter, almost clean. The deck gleams a little like the ship's relieved to be less disgusting. You feel a minor sense of pride. You helped. Sure, you still smell like wet goat, but now it's a slightly cleaner wet goat. Dinner is slightly better. Someone caught a fish miraculously, and it's cooked over a controlled flame with a handful of herbs. Probably stolen from the captain's stash. It tastes like actual food. You savor every bite, even if there's sand in it. The sailor next to you taps his bowl and declares, "Best meal all week." You nod, mouthful. Night falls again, and you collapse in your corner, exhausted from scrubbing every inch of your body in the boat. The stars return silent witnesses to your slow transformation from confused land dweller to semi-functioning deckhand. You've learned to keep your boots near your head rats. You've learned to hang your clothes high spray zone. You've learned that medieval soap makes modern dish detergent feel like a warm hug. As you drift off, the ship creaks less tonight. Or maybe you're just too tired to care. You're not sure what time it is when the shouting starts, but it's still dark, and your body has not consented to waking. A chorus of feet thunders overhead, and someone kicks over a bucket. The usual quiet of night watch is gone, replaced by commotion. You bolt upright, heart-pounding brain lagging behind. Land ho. That's what they're yelling, over and over like it's a surprise. Which, to be fair, it is. You've been at sea so long, your world has narrowed to water, wood, and soup. The idea of land feels almost mythical, like someone declaring unicorn ho. You stumble to the rail, eyes bleary, and sure enough, there it is. A low strip on the horizon. Faint, dark, and unmoving. Land? Cue a flurry of activity. Sails adjusted, ropes hauled. Someone's banging on a barrel, possibly to wake the rats. The ship begins shifting course, slicing toward this blessed new shape like a pilgrim toward a holy relic. You assume the excitement means you're going ashore. A quick bath, a real bed, perhaps an orange ha? That's adorable. You forget you're not a passenger, you're barely crew. You go where the captain says, and right now that's circle the coast and assess. You stay aboard. The land grows clearer. Trees, hills, a small cove. But you keep your distance, pacing the deck like a dog outside a butcher shop. You can smell the promise of dirt and firm footing. You can almost taste it. And then it slips by behind you, swallowed by the sea once more. Turns out this isn't a scheduled stop, just a landmark, a reminder that solid ground exists. Somewhere. Maybe next week, maybe never. Disappointment hangs heavy, but there's work to do. You help raise a spar and get whacked on the shoulder by a loose beam. One sailor pats you sympathetically and mutters, "Baptized by the mast." You're not sure if that's a blessing or a warning. To distract yourself, you ask questions. Dangerous move. Sailors love telling tales, many of them halfway between history and hallucination. One tells you this coast is cursed, that ghost ships drift here on moonless nights. Another claims he saw a giant skull once washed up on a beach. You're tempted to believe him. He has that sincere, dead-eyed look of a man who's seen too much and dried out emotionally. Historians still argue whether medieval sailors truly believed in such sea lore or used it as a form of social bonding, or simply as entertainment. The line between myth and morale booster was thin, especially when your daily life included invisible diseases, random storms, and biscuits that could break your teeth. As the ship veers away from land, the mood settles into a strange calm. The brief glimpse of trees and soil has left everyone a bit wistful. One man leans on the railing, sighing loudly. Could have been goats, he mutters. No one replies. They're all thinking the same thing, the thrill of dry socks and roasted anything. Now comes the boredom again. Land sightings are rare, and the space between them is filled with time. Endless floating time. You start to understand why sailors sang, gambled, and picked fights. It's not just about killing hours, it's about clinging to sanity. You try your hand at rope work, practicing knots you'll never use in your actual life again, unless your future includes hostage situations or an unusual arts and crafts hobby. You struggle with the bowline tangle, the reef knot, and finally succeed in making something that resembles a noose. The crew laughs, but not unkindly. They've all been there. Someone teaches you a chanty, an old one, about a girl who waited 3 years at sea for her sailor lover, only to find he'd married someone else when he returned. It's depressing and catchy. You find yourself humming it while swabbing a particularly ungrateful bit of deck. Later that day, someone spots dolphins again. This time they're playing in the ship's wake. You lean over, watching their slick backs slice through the water. They leap and spin like they're mocking gravity. For a brief golden moment, it's beautiful. Then someone makes a joke about eating one and the spell breaks. The sky turns pink with evening, and you gather with a few others near the forward mast. One of the older sailors pulls out a tiny, battered flute. He plays a simple tune, shaky but clear, and the rest of you just listen. No one speaks. The sea quiets. The stars begin their nightly reveal one by one. That's when the smell hits. It wafts up from below, foul, sour, and absolutely not natural. Someone groans. Another says, that's not just bilge. The captain's alerted. A quick inspection reveals that one of the barrels of preserved fish has spoiled catastrophically. The stench is indescribable, like if regret had a scent and died in a bucket of vinegar. You're on the cleanup crew. Naturally. Below deck, the air is thick with nausea. The fish are not fish anymore, more like ghosts of fish. You gag twice, possibly cry a little, and carry up bucket after bucket of foulness. The deck is cleared, the barrel dumped, and a small ceremony performed. Someone toasts the barrel's demise with a sip of the worst beer on board. Historians still argue whether such ceremonies were common practice or born from sheer desperation to make disgusting chores feel less soul-crushing. Either way, it works. Everyone laughs a little, even you. That night, the sea is calm. You lie on your back again, using a rolled-up sail as a pillow. Your hands reek, your back aches, but the stars are brighter tonight. One sailor points out constellations, not real ones, just names he's given them. The drunk monk, the lost cod, and Brenda. You nod solemnly as if these are canon. You drift to sleep to the sound of someone quietly whistling Brenda. And you dream of goats. You awaken to shouting again, but this time it's not the excited Lookland kind of shouting, it's the more familiar "what now" kind. The ship is lurching ever so slightly, and you hear the unmistakable groan of wood flexing under stress. It's early or late or mid-something time has lost all meaning, and the wind has shifted. Storm's brewing, not a dramatic one yet. Just that ominous mood where the clouds start squatting low and thick, the air grows heavy like wet wool, and everyone develops the same tightness in the jaw. The sailcloth flaps differently, nervous. The gulls vanish, which is never a great sign. You try to remember if you've seen a single gull poop on deck today. Nope, they've bailed. You're handed a rope and told to help double check the rigging. Why me, you ask? The bosun shrugs. Because you're awake. Fair enough. So, up you go. Not all the way to the crow's nest, don't worry, you're not that trusted yet, but high enough to feel your stomach question your life choices. The rigging sways, the wood creaks, and you pour? You are trying to tie knots with numb fingers while pretending the sky isn't turning an unsettling shade of bruise. Medieval ships didn't have accurate forecasts. No Doppler radar, no weather apps, not even a smug old weatherman named Colin. All they had were instincts and clues: the shape of clouds, the color of the horizon, the feel of the wind. And your instincts are now screaming. You should be on a couch. Back on deck, the crew's pace quickens. Sails are reefed, shortened to catch less wind. You learn the term close reef, which basically means we're expecting nonsense. You help stow barrels, tie down crates, and secure the goats. Did we not mention there's a goat on board? There is. Her name is Agnes, and she has no time for your sea legs. She headbutts you once for good measure. The wind picks up. The first real gust hits hard. The ship shudders like it's just remembered it shouldn't be floating. The mast sways, the deck groans, and water sprays up like it's offended by your presence. You duck instinctively and grab whatever's closest, some kind of cleat. Congratulations, you've invented the please don't die grip. Then come the waves. Not monstrous yet, but certainly ambitious. They rise, slap the hull, and spill over the rails like overboiled soup. Every bucket crate and barefoot sailor becomes a projectile. You slide a good 5 feet and only stop because someone's boots absorb your impact. He grunts, doesn't even look down. You think he may be asleep standing up. Below deck chaos. Barrels have rolled loose. Someone's hammock has collapsed. A stash of dried peas has spilled and now acts as a deadly mariner's marbles trap. You help resecure everything, all while holding a bucket because, yes, you're about to vomit. Seasickness in medieval times was both expected and brutally accepted. There were no ginger chews or patches. Just emptying your guts until you adjusted or perished. One old sailor suggests chewing hardtack slowly to anchor your stomach. It doesn't work. You throw up over the side and receive a pat on the back. Now you're really one of us. Historians still debate whether sailors developed immunity over time or simply lived in a permanent state of queasy resignation. Either way, you're now initiated. Up top, things are worsening. Rain begins not polite rhythmic rain, but slapping horizontal spite rain. You blink into it and your eyelids protest. The captain is bellowing commands with a strange calm that feels almost supernatural. You wonder if he's seen worse. You wonder what worse looks like. The ship crests a wave and slams down like a gavel. Everyone collectively groans. The sound of wood actually groaning, might be the most unsettling part. It's like the ship itself is doubting its life choices, too. There's a rope swinging freely near the mainmast. You lunge and catch it instantly soaked to the bone, feeling like a soggy, half-baked biscuit. You tie it off while someone else yells encouragement that sounds suspiciously like insults. Nice knot, landlubber. Whatever it holds. The hours pass in a blur of rain salt and shouted instructions. You lose track of how many times you've bailed water, tied a rope, or whispered threats to the goat who seems oddly unbothered by the weather. At one point, lightning forks across the sky far too close for comfort. The crew goes silent for a moment. A quiet prayer is mumbled. Then someone cracks a joke about Poseidon needing a new boat. You're not sure whether to laugh or panic, so you do both. Finally, blessedly, the storm begins to ease. The wind still growls, but it's less aggressive now. The rain slows. The waves stop trying to do backflips. Everyone looks wrecked like laundry that's been left out too long. You're soaked, bruised, nauseous, and so tired your eyelids feel like they're made of wool. But the ship is intact. No one was lost. A miracle, really. Only one mast cracked, temporarily braced with spare timber. The captain nods approvingly at the crew, which you interpret as a medieval gold star. Dinner tonight is a somber affair. No one really talks. You sit cross-legged with a wooden bowl of lukewarm stew slurping between coughs. Someone's missing an eyebrow from a fire accident. Another sailor's boot was ripped clean in half. But all things considered, you've made it. You lie down later with a new appreciation for stillness. The gentle rock of the calmer sea is almost soothing now. Almost. Every time the ship shifts, your muscles flinch like a dog that's been yelled at too many times. You watch the sky. No stars tonight, just dark velvet and cloud shadow. You hum part of that chanty again, the one about betrayal and seaweed. It's somehow comforting now. The goat bleats from below deck, a weirdly normal sound after so much chaos. You think back to the first day, how new and wide-eyed you were. Now you're a little saltier. Literally and metaphorically. You survived your first storm, which means you're slightly less likely to die in the next one. Congratulations. The storm has passed, but it leaves behind a kind of eerie stillness. The waves roll gently now, too gentle, almost like they're pretending none of the chaos happened. The sky's the color of dirty linen. Everything smells damp, smoky, and faintly of goat because, of course. You stretch your aching limbs and try not to wince. Every muscle protests like you've run a marathon while being mildly electrocuted. You rub your shoulder and stare at the horizon. Nothing. Just an infinite blanket of gray sea merging with the sky in the kind of way that makes you question whether you're in a painting or just permanently dizzy. Now comes the real problem, the aftermath. A ship doesn't bounce back after a storm like a cartoon spring. Everything's off kilter. The sails need mending, the rigging's a snarl of nautical spaghetti, and the water barrels have soaked through half their own contents because someone forgot to secure the lids. That someone may or may not have been you. You're put to work immediately. Sail repair duty? Which sounds vaguely poetic until you're holding a sail the size of a tennis court that smells like wet dog and moldy linen. You're given a curved sailmaker's needle and a spool of thick beeswax thread. It's like sewing a blanket that wants to fight you. Medieval sailcloth, often made from flax or hemp, wasn't exactly featherlight. When soaked, it could weigh hundreds of pounds. You and 3 others wrestle it down, laying it flat along the deck like a cranky sea dragon. Your job? Stitch the tiers, simple in theory, disastrous in practice. Your fingers are blistered within an hour. One older sailor offers advice in the form of vague proverbs, like you're patching the sky. You nod, pretending to understand. You jab your finger. You bleed a little. The sail eats your dignity. Historians still argue whether sails were patched this extensively at sea, or whether ships typically waited until harbor. But clearly, when you're weeks from land harbor's just a rumor. You patch or you drift. By midday, the sun peeks through as if realizing it's been a bit rude lately. The crew is sluggish like a group hangover. Clothes are strung like flags along the railings. One sailor has literally passed out inside a coil of rope and nobody moves him. You attempt to scrape storm grime from the deck. It's a lot like cleaning a driveway with a toothbrush. The only upside, the smell is fading from rotting fish and panic to just damp wood and sweat. Then you get a whiff of something strange. Burnt, numbous, smoky kind of. You follow your nose to the cook's area. They're making ship's bread. Let's talk about that culinary disaster. Ship's bread, also called hardtack, was the cornerstone of medieval naval cuisine. Essentially flour water and heat combined into something the consistency of a bathroom tile. It never goes bad, which is also a clue that it was never truly alive. It's so tough you need to soak it in water ale or your own tears before it's edible. Today, the cook's attempting a fresh batch. You watch as he mixes flour in a wooden trough with water from a barrel you suspect is at least 3 types of algae now. He slaps the dough into discs and throws them near the fire. You poke one and regret it instantly. It's already as hard as your will to live during storm cleanup. But here's the fun part. There are weevils in the flour. Little beetle-type creatures. Totally normal, apparently. Everyone just accepts it. You're told just tap the bread and let them crawl out before you eat. You laugh. No one else does. So you tap your hardtack and yet movement. Several little protein nuggets skitter out. You suddenly realize why some sailors prefer to eat in the dark. Historians still argue whether weevils were an accepted part of naval diet or a tolerated evil that men tried to hide from each other. But given your current experience, gross but necessary feels right. You take a bite. It crunches. Not from the weevils they left, but from the bread itself. You feel your molars splinter. You quietly wish for soup. Later, you get your wish. Kind of. The cook prepares something he calls peas pottage. It's basically mashed peas with a bit of onion and maybe a whisper of salt. It tastes like wet grass and regret, but it's warm. And right now, warmth is everything. You eat your bowl while watching Agnes the goat sniff a coil of rope like it owes her money. She gives you side-eye and walks away. You've officially lost a staring contest to livestock. After lunch, the captain calls for a sounding. That means checking the depth beneath the keel. Not because land is near, but because the currents may have shifted them closer to hidden sandbars or reefs. You help with the lead line a rope with knots at measured intervals and a heavy weight at the end. It's flung over the side. The knots tell you how deep the water is. Yours reads vary. The ocean, ever unbothered, just keeps stretching below you like it has secrets it'll never share. That night the wind settles even more. The sails hang lazy and limp like laundry that's given up on drying. You're now in the doldrums, not the mood, though, that fits too, but a real nautical term for windless zones that trapped ships for days or weeks. You play dice with some of the crew to kill time. The dice are whittled bone and suspiciously loaded. You lose consistently, earning a single boiled egg as consolation. You try not to ask where the egg came from. Someone pulls out a lyre, don't ask how it survived the storm, and begins plucking out something vaguely cheerful. Another starts singing half sarcastic about how he once kissed a barmaid in Calais who may have actually been a thief or a witch. The chorus is just, "She took my shoes," repeated 4 times. You're oddly comforted. This is what life becomes after a storm, oddly domestic. Even after disaster, humans make routines. They fix, mend, eat, joke, hum. You learn not to trust calm seas. They're just breathers between chaos, but you also learn to enjoy them when they come. You lie down on a patch of dry deck, watching stars blink through the slowly clearing sky. The wood beneath you is warped and damp. Your clothes itch. Your stomach churns slightly from peas pottage. And still, you're kind of okay. You sleep with one arm draped over a rope coil like it might anchor you from bad dreams. No storms tonight. Just Agnes snoring softly somewhere below. The days at sea stretch out like a never-ending gray canvas, each one blending into the next with barely a ripple. You're learning that the ocean's version of boredom is both relentless and strangely hypnotic. It's a quiet kind of torture where the biggest event might be a gull, diving a little too close, or a wave that decides to splash just over your boots. You trudge up the gangway again, the sun burning off the morning mist, to reveal the ship in all its weathered glory. The hull creaks softly, a slow pulse reminding you that this giant wooden beast is alive in its own way, and also a lot older than you. The scent of salt and old tar fills your nostrils, a smell that's beginning to feel less like punishment and more like a weird, rough comfort. You're assigned a new task today, cleaning the ship's bilge. If you don't know, the bilge is basically the ship's underbelly where water, muck, and mysteries accumulate. Think of it as a medieval ship's version of a forgotten basement that no one wants to visit but everyone must keep from flooding the house. Armed with a bucket and a scrubbing brush that's seen better centuries, you shuffle down the narrow ladder into the bilge. It's dark and smells like something died 3 times over and decided to throw a party down there. Your boots squelch in the sludge, and your hands quickly lose all feeling as you scoop and scrub. Occasionally, you flinch when a rat's beady eyes catch yours in the dim light, their little bodies darting away with surprising speed. It's not glamorous, far from it, but it's necessary. If the bilge overflows, the ship could founder. And if you founder, well, you can kiss any dreams of land goodbye. You're just about to resign yourself to a lifetime of smelly misery when a voice pipes up from above. Watch out for the bilge rats, says the bosun. They're experts at avoiding your bucket. You laugh despite yourself. The rats here aren't the kind you'd cuddle, they're survivors, legends of endurance, and probably the only creatures on board with a better work ethic than you. Historians still debate whether medieval ships had organized pest control or just accepted the rats as part of the crew. Some suggest rats might have even served a purpose, eating leftover food and keeping disease-carrying bugs in check. Others argue they were a living nightmare, and looking at the way these creatures scurry around you tend to side with that. Back on deck, the sun beats down mercilessly. You rub salt crusted into your eyes and watch as the crew works with methodical slowness. There's a rhythm here: raised sails, swabbed decks, checked ropes that turns the chaos of life at sea into something manageable. You find yourself humming the chanty again. It's stuck in your head like a catchy, annoying song from a merchant's fair. By mid-afternoon, a strange sight catches your eye. A flock of seabirds circles above, not the usual gulls, but something bigger and darker. The captain peers through his spyglass, murmuring, "A possible ship on the horizon." Hope sparks. Maybe, just maybe, there's another human out there. Someone else. The crew perks up, eyes scanning the endless waves. For days, the sea has been an endless void, but the promise of company stirs something in everyone. You find yourself watching the horizon, too willing the tiny speck to grow into something solid. But it doesn't. The day drags on, the speck flickers and fades like a mirage. The ship remains utterly alone. You feel a pang of isolation deeper than the sea beneath you. As night falls, the temperature drops sharply. The sea breeze becomes sharper, whispering cold secrets. You pull your cloak tighter and stand near the rail, watching the moon reflect on the gentle waves. The ocean looks calm, almost friendly, but you know better. It's waiting. Sleep is elusive tonight. Every creak, every slap of water on wood sets your nerves jangling. You try counting knots in the rigging, an old sailor's trick, but the numbers keep shifting. Somewhere below deck, the goat bleats, Agnes still unimpressed by your survival skills. Historians still argue about the mental toll of long sea voyages in medieval times. Some say sailors developed resilience. Others believe many simply lost their minds slowly, quietly, with no one noticing until it was too late. You think you understand the fear now. Not just of storms or hunger, but of endless lonely days with no end in sight. You lie back staring up at the stars. A shooting star streaks across the sky and you make a wish. Not for treasure or glory, just for a little more land. The ship rocks gently beneath you. You breathe in the salty air, aching but alive. And you wonder how many more days you'll last. The morning wakes slow and gray like a reluctant cat, stretching before finally rising. You blink against the dull light filtering through the rigging and realize you've spent another night half listening to the ship's endless creaks and groans, like some ancient beast breathing around you. Today feels different. Not in a dramatic pirate attack kind of way, but subtle. The air is heavier. The salt smells sharper. The crew is quieter, too. You catch the captain staring off at the horizon, eyes narrowed, like he's trying to read a secret message in the waves. You're given a new task: swabbing the deck. Yes, it sounds boring, like cleaning a gigantic wooden floor, but swabbing is essential. The decks are slippery with salt, fish guts, and who knows what else, and a slip could be your ticket to an unexpected swim. Plus, it's the perfect opportunity to discover which plank will give out next. Armed with a big mop-like brush and a bucket of seawater, you begin your chore. You push and pull the bristles, scrubbing along the wood in rhythm. You're vaguely aware of the goat wandering nearby, sniffing at the ropes, and occasionally chewing on some suspiciously salty leather strap. Agnes is a persistent little beast, and her antics offer brief comic relief amid the monotony. As you work, you notice something odd. The wood beneath your feet is softer than usual. A plank near the starboard rail dips slightly when you step on it. A chill runs down your spine. This isn't good. You report it to the mate, who frowns and orders the area to be cordoned off. A repair party forms immediately, consisting mostly of burly sailors who grunt and curse while prying up the weakened plank. Underneath a small pool of water has collected a sign the hull is leaking. Leaks are a sailor's nightmare, especially on a medieval ship. There's no fancy plumbing or pumps here, just buckets, muscle, and sheer willpower. The crew immediately starts bailing water from the hold, each dip of the bucket feeling like a race against time. You join in scooping water that's dark and cold and smells faintly of decay. Your arms burn after just a few rounds, but the adrenaline pushes you on. Historians still argue about how effective medieval crews were at managing leaks at sea. Some suggest that constant repairs were routine and expected. Others believe ships often limped to shore barely afloat. The truth probably lies somewhere in the middle, and right now you're living it. Between bailing, the carpenter gets to work. You watch as he cuts new planks, hammering and sealing with pitch. His hands are scarred and skilled, moving with a confidence born from years of practice. You wonder how many times this ship has been patched and repatched like a tired quilt holding the crew's hopes afloat. The goat, ever curious, wanders near the work area and gets an unexpected hoof in the shins. She bleats indignantly and retreats clearly, deciding the carpenter is not worth the trouble. Once the leak is under control, the crew settles into a tense routine of checks and repairs. Everyone knows this is just one battle in a long war with the sea. Later, the cook offers something new, a rare treat of salted fish. It's tough, chewy, and smells faintly of the ocean itself. You chew cautiously, grateful for the protein, even if it tastes like old boots. As the day wanes, you stand at the bow watching the sun dip low, turning the water to molten gold. The ship rocks gently, the repaired plank holding firm. The crew is weary but determined. You think back to the goat, the rats, the hardtack, and the endless sea. Life aboard this medieval ship is a relentless test of patience, endurance, and a stubborn refusal to give up. You're still here. For now. Dawn arrives wrapped in a cloak of fog, softening the edges of the endless sea around you. The ship moves silently, a wooden shadow drifting through a misty dream. You're waking slowly now, muscles stiff, and mind still tangled in half-remembered images of the night before. Agnes the goat is bleeding somewhere below deck like an alarm clock that only goats could invent. Today, you're on lookout duty. It sounds glamorous until you realize your post is a tiny platform perched precariously above the deck, swaying with every creak and groan of the ship. The cold wind cuts through your clothes and you clutch the railing, feeling the salt spray on your face. Hours pass. The sea remains unbroken. No ships, no land, just the vast expanse of blue-gray water and the gray-blue sky merging seamlessly. Your eyes begin to play tricks, seeing shapes in the waves that aren't really there. A school of fish becomes a pod of dolphins, a floating log morphs into a giant sea monster. You try to focus on the horizon, but your mind drifts to the stories you've heard about medieval sailors and their superstitions. Some believe that ships could be haunted by spirits of drowned sailors, others that strange sea creatures roamed just below the surface, waiting to drag the unwary down into watery graves. You remember a particularly odd belief that carrying a piece of whalebone would protect you from storms at sea. Apparently, some sailors were so desperate they'd keep chunks of bone tied to their belts like talismans. You laugh quietly at the thought, imagining a bunch of burly men walking around with whalebone bling. Historians still argue about how seriously these superstitions were taken. Were they genuine beliefs, morale boosters, or just colorful stories told to pass the time? Maybe a bit of all three. Your daydream is broken by a sudden shout from the deck below. Someone spotted something, a dark shape bobbing on the waves. The captain grabs his spyglass, the crew springs into action, and the ship seems to come alive again. It's a piece of driftwood, but for a moment hope flickered. As evening falls, you gather with the crew around a small fire. The cook tries his hand at roasting some salted fish over the flames. The smell is promising, but the taste is a dry, chewy reminder that cooking at sea is an art form still far from mastered. You share stories with the sailors, tall tales, legends, and a few surprisingly clever jokes about the goat's latest escapades. Agnes seems to have a reputation as the ship's unofficial mascot, and her antics are the highlight of many weary days. As you lie down to sleep, the ship rocking gently beneath you, you feel a strange mixture of exhaustion and quiet contentment. The sea is still vast and mysterious, but for tonight it's a lullaby. The sun rises sluggishly through a veil of mist, casting a pale, ghostly glow over the endless ocean. You're already on your feet, the salty air filling your lungs with a sharp freshness that seems almost cruel after weeks at sea. The deck creaks beneath your boots as you join the others, preparing the ship for the day's work. The familiar chorus of groans and sighs from the timber, as if the ship itself is waking reluctantly, just like you. Your assignment today is rope maintenance, a job that sounds dull but is surprisingly important. The rigging is a tangled mess after the last storm, and if the ropes snap at the wrong moment, the sails could go flying and the ship could be left helplessly drifting. You grab a coil of rope, its fibers rough and biting at your skin. You begin the painstaking work of untangling knots that stubbornly resist wrapping and twisting themselves like the sea's own mischievous traps. As you pull and tug, you notice the salty crust baked into the ropes, a gritty reminder of the relentless exposure to sea spray and sun. You remember reading somewhere that medieval sailors often treated their ropes with animal fat, or tallow to preserve them longer, a slippery, greasy ritual that helped stave off rot and kept the fibers from falling apart too soon. The idea of sweaty sailors slathering their ropes with rendered pig fat is simultaneously disgusting and oddly comforting, a reminder that survival at sea was as much about trial and error as it was about skill. Suddenly, a shout from the crow's nest breaks your concentration. The lookout has spotted something, a dark shape moving swiftly just beyond the ship's bow. The captain rushes over, squinting into his trusty spyglass like a hawk eyeing prey. The crew gathers, excitement buzzing quietly through the air, and for a moment the tediousness of rope work is forgotten. It's a pod of dolphins racing alongside the ship. Their sleek, smooth bodies leap and glide effortlessly through the waves, casting sparkling splashes that glitter in the morning sun. The dolphins seem to ride the bow wave with playful ease, twisting and turning as if they're toying with the ship and its weary crew. For a brief moment, the spirits of the sailors lift hearts buoyed by this sudden reminder of life beyond the hardships of the voyage. You feel a pang of envy watching the dolphins. Unlike you, they're unshackled by rope sails and the endless drudgery of human worries. Carried by the whims of the sea, they embody freedom itself. You wonder if medieval sailors saw dolphins as good luck charms. Some believed dolphins were guides or protectors signaling safe passage or the approach of land. Others thought they were the souls of lost sailors or even messengers from the gods. Historians still argue whether these beliefs were rooted in genuine superstition or simply romanticized later. Either way, the sight of the dolphins feels like a small gift from the ocean, a reminder that amidst all the danger and hardship, the sea holds wonders as well as threats. The day stretches on with the routine tasks you've come to know so well, repairing torn sails, checking rigging, and hauling heavy barrels of fresh water from the hold. The sun climbs higher, burning away the morning mist and turning the deck into a hot, sticky arena. Sweat soaks your shirt, and the salt crusts on your skin itch mercilessly. Your muscles ache from the endless labor, and your hands are raw and blistered, but you keep going because that's all there is to do. Lunch is a sparse affair, hardtack, soaked in brackish water and a bit of salted fish. You chew slowly the bread, nearly impossible to swallow, but it fills the gnawing emptiness in your stomach. You remind yourself that this diet has sustained sailors for centuries, even if it tastes like chewing on old cardboard. At least the salted fish has a hint of flavor, something to break the monotony. As the afternoon wanes, you're tasked with inspecting the mast and rigging once more. The ropes creak and sway with the wind, the sails billowing overhead like giant canvas wings. You climb carefully the wood warm beneath your hands from the sun. Up here, the wind is sharp and relentless, tugging at your clothes and whipping your hair. You grip the ropes tightly, heart pounding, knowing one wrong move could mean a nasty fall into the churning sea below. Looking out, you spot a strange dark shape far off in the distance. Your heart quickens. Is it another ship land? Your mind spins with possibilities. But as you watch, the shape dissolves into the haze, a fleeting illusion born of exhaustion and hope. Back on deck, the crew is buzzing with quiet speculation. Some whisper about sea monsters, giants lurking just beneath the waves, ready to drag the unwary down. Others tell tales of ghost ships, spectral vessels doomed to sail forever, their crews cursed by ancient wrongs. The stories fill the air like fog, thick and chilling. You join in with a laugh, sharing a joke about Agnes the goat outsmarting the rats again. It's silly, but the humor helps. Medieval sailors relied on stories and laughter as much as on ropes and sails. They kept the darkness at bay with a sharp wit and a stubborn spirit. As night descends, the ship is wrapped in silence. The stars twinkle coldly above indifferent witnesses to your small, precarious existence on this vast ocean. You lie down on the deck, wrapped in a thin blanket, the gentle rocking of the ship lulling you toward sleep. The smell of salt and tar mingles with the night air, a lullaby that is both soothing and relentless. In these quiet moments, you realize how fragile this wooden world is, how easily it could be swallowed by the sea or shattered by a storm. And yet you're still here, still fighting, still holding on. The dawn light slips quietly over the horizon, spreading a soft watery glow across the endless ocean. You rise once more, muscles aching but spirit stubbornly intact. Today your job is to help with the sails, the massive sheets of canvas that catch the wind, and drive this wooden beast forward. You can't help but marvel at the sheer size of them, woven from heavy flax patched countless times, and stained with salt and sweat. Climbing the rigging to reach the yards where the sails hang is no small feat. Each rung swings unpredictably as the ship rocks beneath your feet and the salty wind bites your face. Up here, the world narrows to ropes, sails, and sky, a precarious stage for a human balancing act. One misstep, one loose grip, and you'd be plummeting into the chilly, unforgiving sea below. You struggle to secure a stubborn sail flap, your fingers fumbling with knots, slick from the seawater and grease. The captain's gruff voice cuts through the air, barking orders and encouragement, like a drill sergeant who knows the stakes. Every pull on a rope, every tighten of a knot, feels like a negotiation with nature itself. You pause for a moment, catching your breath, and let your gaze drift across the endless waves. The ocean here is a shifting mosaic of blues and grays, sunlight sparkling on the crests like scattered jewels. It's beautiful, yes, but also indifferent, a vast expanse that doesn't care about your struggles or hopes. While up there, you overhear a curious sailor muttering about dead men's ropes, strands said to be cursed, woven from fibers collected at night in graveyards to protect the ship from harm. It sounds like a sailor's superstition, but you find yourself wondering if any of it could be true. After all, the sea has always been a realm of mystery and fear. Historians still argue whether these kinds of sailor superstitions had real impacts on crew morale or were simply colorful tales passed down to keep spirits high during long, bleak voyages. Either way, they're a reminder that medieval sailors lived in a world where science hadn't yet demystified the ocean's many secrets. By midday, the sun has climbed high, beating down relentlessly. The deck is a furnace, and the salt on your skin prickles like tiny needles. Lunch is a quick, unsatisfying meal hardtack again, with a smear of coarse cheese that barely masks the stale taste. You swallow it down with brackish water, grateful for any sustenance. The afternoon is spent hauling heavy barrels of fresh water and inspecting the hull for any signs of wear or damage. You crouch by the ship's side, peering into the dark hold, where the smell of damp wood and stale air mixes with the faint tang of fish. Below decks, rats scurry in the shadows, their tiny eyes gleaming with survival instinct. Later, you find yourself chatting quietly with an older sailor named Tom. He shares a quirky fact. Medieval ships often carried a live pig or goat, not just for food, but because their movements helped stabilize the ship during rough seas. You smile thinking of Agnes's antics from a few days ago, imagining her as the ship's secret little guardian. As evening falls, the crew gathers once more, trading stories and jokes under a sky thick with stars. You lie back on the deck, the gentle sway of the ship like a slow, rocking cradle. The hardships and strange superstitions fade into the night, replaced by a quiet, steady rhythm, the pulse of life at sea. Morning creeps over the horizon with a quiet persistence, the first pale light stretching out like a slow yawn across the restless sea. You wake to the steady creak and groan of the ship, a sound so familiar now that it almost feels like the vessel itself is breathing alongside you. Outside, the salty air is cool and sharp, carrying the faint tang of seaweed and brine. Today, you're assigned to the galley area, though calling it a kitchen feels generous. The cook's domain is a cramped space below deck where smoke and the smell of burnt food mingle with the damp, salty air. The low ceiling forces you to stoop, and the rough wooden benches are scarred by years of constant use. The cook, a wiry man named Jory with a permanent layer of soot smudged across his face, greets you with a half smile. Ready to learn the art of medieval culinary torture, he jokes. Though his eyes reveal the fatigue of someone who's battled countless fires, spilled buckets of brackish water, and survived on a diet of preserved scraps. Your first task is to tend the fire beneath the iron cauldron, a perpetual challenge in itself. The galley's tiny hearth struggles to keep a steady flame, especially when the sea air gusts through the open hatch and the ship rolls beneath your feet. You poke at the smoldering embers, coaxing the flames to life while dodging clouds of acrid smoke that make your eyes water. Food at sea is a lesson in compromise and resilience. Fresh produce is nearly impossible to keep by the time a ship has been at sea for a few weeks. All that's left are salted meats, hardtack, basically flavorless rock-hard biscuits, and whatever dried legumes can be coaxed into something resembling a stew. As Jory adds salted pork and dried peas to the cauldron, he shares a curious medieval cooking fact. Sailors sometimes use stale bread soaked in vinegar as a makeshift sourdough starter, creating a fermented dough that could be baked ashore if the ship ever reached land. You imagine the slightly tangy smell and wonder if anyone actually enjoyed such bread, or if it was just another survival trick. The galley smells faintly of salt smoke, and whatever bits of food the rats haven't yet claimed. Rats are everywhere on these ships, fattened on scraps and bold enough to scamper openly among the crew. They're both pests and unintentional companions, survivors like you, living on the edge of civilization. Historians still argue whether the presence of rats was more dangerous for health, or whether the rats themselves helped by eating bits of spoiled food that might otherwise cause sickness. It's a grim sort of symbiosis in this floating ecosystem. Between tending the fire and stirring the pot, you learn more about the delicate balance the cook must maintain. Too much water and the stew becomes a watery mess. Too little and it burns on the bottom of the cauldron. Salt is precious, but a pinch too little could mean scurvy, while too much leaves everyone thirsty and miserable. Jory pulls out a piece of hardened bread and smears on a thick layer of salted butter, the closest thing to a treat on this voyage. You break off a small chunk and chew it slowly, savoring the salty richness amid the bland monotony. Later, you help haul fresh water barrels from the hold to the deck. The barrels are heavy and the slippery wood makes the work tricky. The sea spray glistens on your skin and your clothes cling uncomfortably as sweat mixes with salt. You remember reading that medieval sailors sometimes drank beer or weak ale instead of water to avoid waterborne illnesses, though the alcohol content was low enough not to cause drunkenness. The afternoon is a haze of repetitive tasks, patching sails, tightening rigging, and bailing water from the bilges. Your muscles ache from the constant labor, but the rhythm of work keeps your mind steady. There's a strange comfort in routine, even when the work is exhausting and the conditions relentless. As the sun begins to dip low, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, you join the crew for a moment of respite. Someone lights a small pipe, and the smoky tendrils curl lazily through the air. Tales begin to weave around the firelight, ghostly legends of cursed ships doomed to sail forever, or sea monsters that drag entire crews beneath the waves. One story stands out, a tale of the Black Dog, a phantom ship said to appear before terrible storms. Sightings were considered an omen of doom, and sailors would cross themselves or clutch lucky charms when the shadowy vessel was spotted. You realize this superstition might have been as real to them as the ship beneath your feet is to you. You share a quiet laugh with a fellow sailor about Agnes the goat, who has somehow become the unofficial mascot of the ship. She's a cunning little troublemaker, stealing bits of food and managing to avoid every attempt to shoo her off. The goat's antics are a small joy amid the hardships, a reminder that even on a medieval ship, life could still surprise you with moments of levity. Night descends, slowly wrapping the ship in a cool darkness. The stars emerge scattered like diamonds across the velvet sky. The ocean's surface reflects their light in shimmering ripples, and the gentle rocking of the ship lulls you toward sleep. You think back over the day, the hard work, the fleeting moments of beauty, the stories shared, and feel a deep respect for those medieval sailors who endured so much with so little. The sea remains an unpredictable, unforgiving force, but for now, it cradles you gently. You close your eyes, the sounds of creaking wood and distant waves blending into a soft, endless lullaby. The day begins under a heavy gray sky that presses down on the ship like a damp blanket. The air is thick with the scent of salt and seaweed, mixed with the unmistakable musk of sweat and wood tar. You wake feeling the damp chill seeping into your bones, the coldness a stark contrast to yesterday's baking sun. The ship rocks gently, but the movement is unpredictable sometimes. A slow sway, other times a sudden jolt as the waves shift beneath you. Your task this morning is to help with navigation, well as much as a medieval sailor can navigate without modern tools. The captain unrolls a worn parchment map, the edges frayed and stained, while the ship's navigator consults a heavy brass astrolabe. You watch closely as the navigator adjusts the instrument, squinting at the sun through a slit in the sail, trying to pinpoint the ship's latitude. You learn that medieval sailors relied on a mix of celestial navigation, dead reckoning, and good old-fashioned guesswork. Without a reliable chronometer to measure longitude, accurately determining east-west position was mostly guesswork, a dangerous uncertainty that could send ships wildly off course. As you study the map, you notice symbols, some familiar like coastlines and ports, others strange and enigmatic like drawings of sea monsters and whirlpools. These illustrations were meant to warn or mystify a blend of practical advice and superstition. You wonder if those monsters were ever more than the shadows of waves or the outlines of distant landforms seen through fog. The navigator shares a quirky tidbit some sailors believed carrying a piece of unicorn horn, actually a narwhal tusk, could protect them from storms and evil spirits. Of course, you're skeptical, but the belief underscores how much faith medieval sailors placed in talismans and magic alongside their charts and instruments. Historians still argue whether these superstitions helped crews maintain morale or simply distracted them from the very real dangers they faced. Either way, navigating the open sea was a hazardous endeavor filled with unknowns and fraught with peril. By midday, the sky darkens further and the wind picks up, whipping the sails into a frenzy. The ship groans as the crew rushes to adjust the rigging hauling ropes and tightening knots with practiced urgency. You join in, your hands blistered but steady, pulling with the rhythm of the others. Suddenly, a shout rings out from the crow's nest. A ship is spotted on the horizon, a dark silhouette against the gray sky. Excitement and tension ripple through the crew. Is it a friendly vessel, a merchant ship perhaps, or something more ominous like a pirate or enemy warship? The captain squints through his spyglass, eyes narrowing. The ship's outline is indistinct, but its speed and course suggest it might be closing in fast. You feel a knot of anxiety tighten in your stomach on a medieval ship. Encounters with strangers at sea could mean anything from trade and camaraderie to violence and capture. The crew prepares for all possibilities, readying weapons and securing valuables. The tension is palpable, each man watching the horizon with a mix of hope and dread. As the approaching ship draws nearer, the captain calls out orders to signal and identify themselves. The exchange of flags and gestures is a delicate dance steeped in protocol and danger. After a tense hour, it becomes clear the ship is a friendly fishing vessel returning home. Relief floods through the crew and laughter breaks out as the mood lightens. The encounter is a stark reminder of how precarious life at sea was. Every meeting could turn either to friendship or disaster. That evening, as the storm clouds begin to break apart and stars twinkle through the clearing sky, you sit quietly on deck. The waves gently rock the ship, their rhythmic lapping a soothing counterpoint to the day's tension. You think about the countless sailors who face similar moments alone on vast seas, dependent on the skill of their leaders, the strength of their ships, and a good measure of luck. You wrap yourself in a thin blanket, the cold night air seeping in, and close your eyes. The ship's steady creak, the distant cry of a gull, and the soft slap of waves against the hull blend into a lullaby that carries you towards sleep. The morning fog hangs heavy over the deck, wrapping the ship in a thick, ghostly veil. Visibility is reduced to mere meters, and the usual horizon, the endless blue line where sea meets sky, is nowhere to be seen. You stand near the bow, the wood slick beneath your feet, ears straining for any sound that might warn of nearby hazards. The faint slap of waves against rocks, the distant call of seabirds, the creak of other vessels in the mist. This kind of fog is a sailor's nemesis, an invisible wall that strips away all landmarks and makes navigation a guessing game. You try to remember the lessons from yesterday. Relying on the sun is impossible when it's hidden, and the compass, though primitive, is your closest friend. Yet even with the compass dead, reckoning in fog is prone to errors, and one wrong turn could spell disaster. The captain orders a reduction in sail area, knowing that less speed means more control. The crew moves efficiently, trimming the canvas and securing loose ropes. The air is thick with dampness, each breath tasting of salt and mist. The fog seems to swallow sounds, muffling voices and footfalls, making the ship feel like it's sailing through a dream or a nightmare. You help secure the anchor lines, readying them for use in case the ship needs to stop suddenly. The anchor is a heavy iron claw designed to bite into the seabed and hold firm. Yet medieval anchors were often unreliable, and the process of dropping and weighing anchor was laborious and risky, especially in low visibility. Nearby, a sailor shares an odd fact. Medieval crews sometimes used caged birds, usually crows or ravens, to help detect land. The idea was simple: if the bird flew off in a certain direction, land was likely that way. It's a crude navigation tool, but one that underscores the desperation sailors felt when surrounded by endless fog and sea. Historians still argue whether such bird releases were actually effective or more of a ritual to ease the crew's nerves. Either way, it shows how medieval sailors blended observation, superstition, and hope to survive. As the hours crawl by, tension builds. Every creak of the ship and splash of waves feels amplified, a reminder of how vulnerable you are in this vast gray void. The fog's grip tightens, swallowing the ship whole, and your thoughts drift to the dangers lurking unseen beneath the waves, hidden reefs, sudden shoals, or enemy ships. You recall that some ships carried special lookout poles, long wooden staffs, fitted with bells or rattles. When waved, these would create noise to signal other vessels or alert the crew of obstacles. It's an ingenious, if rudimentary, system in a time before radios and radar. Suddenly, a distant, muffled horn sound cuts through the fog. The crew snaps to attention. Horns, bells, and shouted warnings were essential in medieval maritime communication, especially in conditions like this. The source is unclear, but the captain's sharp command set the crew into motion, readying to respond. Minutes stretch into what feels like hours before the fog finally begins to lift. Light filters through in soft beams, revealing a rocky coastline not far away, an unexpected and unwelcome sight. The ship adjusts course, the sails filling again with a gentle breeze. The rocks are jagged, dark sentinels guarding the shore, and the crew carefully maneuvers to avoid them. This kind of near miss was all too common in medieval sailing. Without accurate charts or navigational aids, ships often came dangerously close to disaster. You reflect on how medieval sailors must have lived with constant awareness of death's proximity. A miscalculation here, a rogue wave there, and their journey could end abruptly and painfully. In the afternoon, the weather clears and the sea calms. You join the crew for maintenance tasks, scraping barnacles from the hull, re-oiling wooden planks to protect against rot, and checking the rigging for wear. The work is dirty and repetitive, but essential. A neglected ship quickly becomes unseaworthy. You learn that shipworm, a type of marine mollusk, was a dreaded enemy. These tiny creatures bored into the wooden hull, causing hidden damage that could weaken the ship from within. Medieval sailors tried to combat shipworm with layers of tar and pitch, but it was a constant battle. A sailor shows you a piece of treated wood scarred with tiny holes and channels proof of the relentless attack of shipworm. It's a sobering reminder that the sea itself was as much an adversary as the weather or enemy ships. As evening falls, the crew gathers on deck, tired but relieved. The fog's threat has passed and the horizon is clear once again. Stories and songs ripple through the group tales of far-off lands, daring escapes, and mythical sea creatures. You listen to a particularly strange tale about the Phantom Fiddler, a ghostly musician said to appear on stormy nights, playing eerie melodies that could calm or summon storms. The story is met with skeptical laughter, but you notice a flicker of unease in some faces. These tales, though fanciful, served an important purpose. In the isolation and danger of medieval seafaring, they bound the crew together, offering comfort and distraction from the relentless uncertainty. As night deepens, you lie back on the deck, the stars clear and bright above. The sea is quiet, the ship rocking gently in its cradle. Your thoughts drift, carried on the waves as sleep pulls you beneath its tide. Dawn breaks slowly, a muted palette of grays and soft blues brushing the sky. The sea is calm, its surface a mirror reflecting the light's tentative advance. You wake with a sense of purpose, knowing today will be different, a day to face the less visible challenges of life aboard a medieval ship. The invisible foes you can't see but feel creeping into every corner. Your first duty is to assist with the ship's hygiene routine. Yes, hygiene on a medieval ship, though the phrase feels almost like a joke. The conditions below deck are cramped and dank with little fresh air or privacy. Crew members share small, musty hammocks stacked closely together, and the smell is a complex blend of sweat, damp wood, and stale air. You help carry buckets of seawater to the deck where the crew washes their faces and scrubs their hands, trying to keep the grime at bay. Soap is a luxury often made from animal fat and ashes, and it's rationed carefully. You notice how the sailor's skin looks weathered and cracked, a map of their hard life exposed to salt and sun. The cook Jory jokes that the ship's rats probably have better hygiene than the crew, which earns a few grim laughs. Rats are notorious carriers of disease, and on a ship packed tight like this one, illness could spread like wildfire. You've heard stories of scurvy and dysentery decimating crews, wiping out entire voyages before they even reach their destination. A bit of fringe history sneaks in here. Medieval sailors sometimes carried lucky charms made of coral or bone, believed to ward off disease and bad luck. You're skeptical but curious, maybe a placebo effect helped keep morale up during long, grueling journeys. Historians still argue whether medieval hygiene practices actually prevented outbreaks, or if the cramped conditions doomed most voyages to illness regardless. The lack of clean water and fresh food made keeping healthy a constant uphill battle. Next, you help the carpenter inspect the ship's hull and interior. The carpenter's role is crucial. He's the ship's doctor for wood patching leaks and repairing damage before it becomes catastrophic. You watch as he checks the planks for signs of rot or warping, tapping them with a small hammer, listening for hollow sounds. He points out a particularly troublesome section near the stern, where the wood has softened and cracked likely from exposure to constant moisture. This kind of damage could allow water to seep in, slowly risking sinking or making the ship unstable. You learn about the delicate balance of maintaining the hull. Too much patching adds weight and slows the ship, but neglect invites disaster. Medieval ships lacked the advanced materials of today, so every repair required skill and judgment. Later, you help repair a small patch from tar-soaked canvas and wooden planks, reinforcing the damaged area. The smell of pitch and tar is strong, sticky on your fingers and clothes. It's a harsh, acrid scent, but one you come to associate with safety and survival. The carpenter shares a quirky fact in some medieval ports. Ships were careened tilted onto their sides on beaches or ramps to allow hull cleaning and repair. This was dangerous work, requiring precise timing with tides, and often done under the watchful eye of locals eager for trade or work. In the afternoon, a sudden squall sweeps in dark clouds rolling overhead like an angry beast. The wind howls, whipping the sails and rattling the rigging. The crew scrambles to secure everything, tying down loose gear and reefing the sails to reduce wind pressure. You feel the ship tilt sharply, the deck heaving beneath your feet. Rain lashes down, stinging your skin and filling the air with the sharp scent of ozone. Thunder rumbles in the distance and the sea froths as waves grow taller, slamming against the hull. In this chaos, the work becomes urgent and instinctual. Every second counts to keep the ship upright and moving forward. The squall lasts only minutes, but it feels like hours as the storm's fury tests your resolve and the ship's integrity. Once the skies clear, the crew exhales collectively, fatigue and relief mingling in the air. You notice the damage some sails have: torn edges, ropes frayed or snapped. Repairs will be needed soon, but for now, survival is victory. As evening falls, you sit near the mast, watching the sun sink below the horizon in a blaze of fiery orange. The sea calms again, its surface shimmering like molten gold. The tension of the day fades, replaced by a quiet awe at the ocean's power and beauty. You think about how medieval sailors lived for these moments, the rare perfect sunsets, the fragile peace after a storm. They faced a world of dangers and discomforts most of us couldn't imagine, yet they endured, driven by necessity, adventure, or the hope of a better life. You close your eyes, the gentle creak of the ship and the soft lapping of waves a lullaby. Sleep beckons, wrapping you in its dark, welcoming arms. The morning light seeps in cool and pale as you wake to the persistent creak and groan of the ship's timbers. The sea is restless today, rolling with a low, steady swell that tests every plank and nail in the vessel. You rub the sleep from your eyes and steady yourself as the deck rocks beneath your feet. A reminder that even in calm weather, the ocean is never truly still. Your first duty is to assist with the ship's provisions, check a critical task on any medieval voyage. The ship's storeroom is a cramped, shadowy space below deck where barrels and sacks of food are stacked tight. The smell is heavy, damp grain, cured meat, dried fish, and the faintest trace of mold. You squeeze past crates, careful not to disturb the precarious piles. You count barrels of salted pork, sacks of hardtack biscuits, those famously dense dry rations that medieval sailors relied on, and casks of fresh water, precious and often rationed. The cook warns you that the water supply is running dangerously low. Fresh water was among the most precious commodities on any ship, and its scarcity could quickly turn a journey into a desperate struggle. Salted and dried foods were the staples, but they came with drawbacks. Hardtack could last for months, but it was nearly impossible to eat without soaking, and often turned to rock-hard slabs that chipped teeth or lodged in throats. Salted pork provided calories and protein, but was greasy and sometimes infested with maggots. The absence of fresh fruits and vegetables meant scurvy was a constant threat. You pass a barrel with a curious mark, a red cross painted on the side. The cook explains it's a superstition. Marking provisions with symbols was thought to ward off spoilage and bad luck. Sailors believed in signs and omens as much as they did in rations and rigging. Historians still argue whether these beliefs had any real effect on crew health, or if they simply offered psychological comfort in an environment fraught with uncertainty. Next, you help the ship's surgeon, or more accurately, the ship's medic, who is a grizzled man named Edric with a reputation for patching wounds with whatever he can find. Medical knowledge was rudimentary, based mostly on herbal remedies, folk wisdom, and trial and error. You observe as Edric tends to a sailor's blistered hands, using a poultice made from crushed herbs and honey. The antiseptic properties of honey were known, even then a surprising fact amid the otherwise primitive medical practices. You learn about the constant dangers of infection. A simple cut or scrape could become deadly without proper care, and diseases like typhus and dysentery lurked below decks, spreading rapidly in the cramped quarters. The medic shares a bizarre but true fact. Some medieval ships carried a live cat aboard, not just to catch rats, but because sailors believed cats could sense supernatural danger or ward off evil spirits. The ship's cat, a sleek black feline named Shadow, slinks between barrels, a silent guardian of both rodent and spirit. As the day wears on, the crew undertakes an important task, checking and tightening the rigging. You climb into the rigging under careful supervision, your heart pounding as you ascend the swaying mast. The ropes are thick and rough, frayed in places, and creak ominously under tension. You help secure knots, learn to tie the bowline and clove hitch, and feel a surge of accomplishment as you master these medieval sailors' staples. The rigging is the ship's nervous system. Without it, the sails would falter and the vessel would be lost. You marvel at how medieval sailors managed to operate these complex systems without the safety gear or technology we take for granted today. A single misstep could send a man plunging into the cold, unforgiving sea. You remember that some medieval ships used leather thongs wrapped around ropes to protect them from wear and weather. This practical but labor-intensive technique extended the life of vital equipment, highlighting the constant maintenance necessary on any voyage. As afternoon turns to evening, a gentle breeze carries the scent of distant land. The lookout shouts from the crow's nest, a faint outline of coastline appears on the horizon. Excitement ripples through the crew. Land means fresh food, fresh water, and a chance to stretch weary legs. The captain orders the sails trimmed for approach, and the ship changes course toward the welcoming shore. The crew buzzes with anticipation. After weeks at sea, the promise of port is a powerful balm. You stand at the rail watching the coastline grow closer, a patchwork of green fields, craggy cliffs, and small villages nestled along the shore. The seagulls circle overhead, their cries sharp against the wind. But even as hope rises, you're reminded of the dangers that remain. Approaching unfamiliar harbors required skill and local knowledge, and many ships were lost on hidden reefs or in sudden storms during the final approach. You think about the countless sailors who never saw land again, swallowed by the sea, or dashed on rocks mere miles from safety. It's a sobering thought, a reminder that medieval voyages were not just about discovery or trade, but survival against odds that would test even the hardiest souls. Night falls as the ship anchors in a sheltered bay. Lanterns are lit, casting warm pools of light on the deck. The crew relaxes, sharing stories and songs of the sea, their voices weaving a tapestry of life lived on the edge. You lie back, the gentle sway of the ship a cradle. The distant lights of the village flicker like stars, and you drift into a deep, dreamless sleep, carried by the waves and the timeless rhythm of the sea. The salty dawn greets you again, sharper today, with a brisk wind that hints at change. The harbor is alive with activity boats, shuttling back and forth, fishermen hauling in their nets, and merchants shouting prices over the din. The medieval port is a bustling mix of woodstone and shouted orders, a stark contrast to the open sea you've known for days. You disembark with the crew boots thudding on uneven cobblestones, the air thick with the mingled scents of fish smoke and fresh bread. The market stalls are vibrant chaos barrels of salted cod, bundles of dried herbs, sacks of grain, and brightly dyed fabrics fluttering in the breeze. Medieval ports were the lifeblood of commerce and culture crossroads, where languages, goods, and stories mingled. But they were also breeding grounds for disease and tension, as the close quarters and constant flow of strangers created fertile ground for conflict. Your task is to help procure supplies, fresh water, vegetables, and some rare luxuries like onions or garlic that could help stave off illness. You haggle clumsily with a grizzled merchant who seems amused by your sea-worn clothes and nervous questions. You notice the market's quirky side too. Vendors selling strange remedies like powdered unicorn horn or dried griffin claws alongside more mundane spices and herbs. These were believed to have magical properties, and sailors often clung to such beliefs to ease their fears. Historians still argue whether medieval sailors' reliance on these remedies was superstition or early folk medicine with some basis, in fact. Either way, it highlights how myth and reality intertwined in everyday life. Back on the ship, you help unload barrels of fresh water and baskets of vegetables. The smell of fresh earth and green leaves is almost overwhelming after weeks of salted rations. The crew's spirits lift visibly and laughter breaks out more freely. But the city holds its own dangers. Rats scurry through the shadows and you hear whispered warnings about pickpockets and thieves preying on distracted sailors. The ship's bosun keeps a sharp eye reminding everyone to stay alert. You also learn about the strict social hierarchy aboard the ship reflected in port life. Officers mingle with merchants and officials while common sailors stick to rougher quarters. This division often led to tension and conflict, but was accepted as the natural order. As the afternoon drags on, you explore the nearby streets, passing a blacksmith, pounding glowing iron, and a carpenter shaping a new rudder. The sounds and smells are vivid, grounding you in this moment far from the endless ocean. You overhear a local storyteller weaving a tale about a sea monster lurking off the coast, said to drag ships to a watery doom. The story is met with both skepticism and nervous glances. Fear of the unknown was a powerful force after all. Later, you help load the ship with fresh provisions, feeling the weight of crates and barrels as you prepare for departure. The crew works efficiently, knowing the longer the ship stays in port, the more vulnerable it becomes to theft, disease, or political trouble. As night falls, the port's lanterns flicker, casting long shadows across the water. The sounds of the market fade, replaced by the gentle lapping of waves against the hull. You climb the rigging for one last look, the town's lights twinkling like distant stars. You think about the contrast between this busy port and the isolation of the open sea, how medieval sailors moved between these worlds, each with its own challenges and dangers. Settling back on the deck, you wrap yourself in a rough blanket, the ship rocking gently. The cool night air carries the scent of salt and earth, a reminder that while the sea is your constant companion, land remains a fragile refuge. You close your eyes, letting the rhythm of the ship and the distant murmur of the port soothe you into sleep. The morning sun cuts through the lingering mist as you prepare to leave the harbor. The sounds of the port fade behind you, seagulls squawking, ropes creaking, merchants shouting last-minute calls. The ship's sails unfurl, catching the wind with a satisfying snap, and you feel the familiar thrill as the vessel pulls away from land and into the vast expanse of the open sea once more. As the ship gains speed, you observe the daily rhythm of life returning. The crew settles into their routines, some hauling ropes, others inspecting the sails, a few resting where they can find shade. The air smells of salt and tar, punctuated by the occasional whiff of sweat and wood smoke. You help the quartermaster with inventory checks, learning how medieval ships kept track of their goods. Everything was meticulously recorded, from barrels of salted meat to spare rigging. Miscounting or losing supplies could spell disaster far from home. The quartermaster explains that despite their efforts, loss was common. Barrels could leak, rats could gnaw through sacks, and storms might wash cargo overboard. Medieval sailors often faced the frustration of diminished rations before reaching their destinations. Interestingly, some ships carried specially designed water casks, lined with pitch to reduce leakage and contamination, an early example of practical innovation. Still, historians debate just how effective these methods were in preserving quality over long voyages. Later, you join a session where the crew practices emergency drills. The captain emphasizes the importance of quick, coordinated action during crises like fires or sudden storms. You learn how to secure sails, rapidly bail water with hand pumps, and manage lifelines. You notice the ship's fire prevention measures, buckets of sand and water stationed strategically, and watchmen assigned to patrol at all times. Fire was one of the greatest dangers aboard wooden ships, capable of destroying everything in moments. You overhear a discussion about the legendary cursed ship tales. Sailors told stories meant to keep morale up or warn newcomers. One such tale involves a ship supposedly doomed after lighting a lantern below deck during a thunderstorm, sparking a fire that consumed it in minutes. The blend of practical skills and superstition forms the backbone of medieval maritime culture. Historians still argue about the extent to which sailors' beliefs influence their behavior versus purely pragmatic concerns. As the afternoon sun climbs higher, the sea turns restless. Waves begin to build and the crew prepares for the possibility of rough weather. You feel the ship's rhythm quicken, a pulse matching the rising wind. Suddenly, a rogue wave crashes against the hull, drenching the deck and sending a spray of salt water into your face. You grip the rail tightly, heart-pounding adrenaline sharpening your senses. The storm never quite arrives, but the sea remains unsettled. The crew moves with practiced efficiency, adjusting sails and securing loose items. You appreciate the mix of physical labor and mental focus required to keep the ship afloat. As evening falls, a calm returns. The sun sinks slowly, painting the sky in shades of pink and purple. The crew gathers around a small fire, sharing stories and songs that echo across the water. You reflect on the unique bond forged by hardship and shared experience, a brotherhood as much about trust as skill. Lying back on the deck, the stars emerge twinkling like distant beacons. The ocean's vastness hums a steady lullaby. You feel the weight of history beneath you, the countless sailors who face these same seas, their hopes and fears carried by the tides. Sleep comes softly, wrapped in the gentle rocking and the whisper of the waves. The gray light of dawn creeps over the horizon, casting a misty veil over the restless sea. You awaken to a chill in the air and the faint scent of salt and seaweed. The crew is already moving, their footsteps soft on the wooden deck as they prepare for the day's work. The routine feels comforting and relentless, a cycle of tasks designed to keep the ship sailing and the crew alive. Today, your focus shifts to navigation, the art and science that kept medieval sailors on course when landmarks were nowhere in sight. You join the navigator, a weathered man named Alaric, who unfurls a large worn parchment covered in faded charts and mysterious symbols. Alaric explains the basics. The sun and stars were the primary guides, along with the direction of the wind and the color of the sea. Without modern instruments, sailors relied on tools like the astrolabe, a simple device to measure the angle of the sun or a star above the horizon. You take turns peering through a small wooden ring on the astrolabe, trying to gauge the sun's altitude. The device feels fragile, its wood smoothed by years of use. It's fascinating how sailors could estimate latitude with such rudimentary tools, navigating vast oceans with a mix of observation, experience, and luck. Alaric shares a quirky tidbit. Some medieval sailors believed the North Star was a celestial anchor, holding the heavens in place and ensuring safe passage. This idea wasn't just poetic, it helped focus their navigation and morale. Historians still argue whether medieval sailors had a comprehensive understanding of longitude, as accurate timekeeping at sea was nearly impossible. The challenge of east-west navigation remained a mystery for centuries, adding a layer of uncertainty to every voyage. As you study the charts, you notice strange markings, tiny crosses, swirling lines, and depictions of mythical creatures like sea serpents and mermaids. These embellishments were common, serving as both warnings and storytelling tools, reflecting sailors' fears and imagination. The navigator points out a particular region marked with a sea monster, explaining how such symbols cautioned crews about treacherous waters, hidden reefs, or dangerous currents. After some practice with the astrolabe and charts, you help the lookout climb the mast to get a better view. From this vantage point, the ocean stretches endlessly, its surface broken only by whitecaps and distant clouds. You realize how vulnerable the ship and crew truly are, tiny specks on a vast, unpredictable stage. Yet there's a strange comfort in this vulnerability, a reminder that despite centuries of progress, the sea remains a force beyond complete control. Later, you assist with maintaining the ship's compass, a relatively new addition to navigation in medieval times. The compass with its simple magnetic needle revolutionized sea travel by providing a reliable reference, even on cloudy days or at night. You learn that compasses were initially met with suspicion and fear. Some believed they were cursed or linked to dark magic. Over time, their practical benefits won over the skeptics. The day ends with a quiet moment, watching the sun dip low, the sky aflame with color. The ship sails, steadily guided by stars, instruments, and centuries of accumulated wisdom. You lie down on the deck, the cool wood pressing against your back, and listen to the sea's steady heartbeat. The challenges of navigation remind you that every journey is as much about hope and trust as skill. Sleep envelops you gently, the ship rocking beneath you like a cradle. The dawn light filters through a shroud of fog, softening the edges of the sea and sky. The ship moves quietly through the mist, the usual sounds muffled, creating an eerie, otherworldly atmosphere. You sense the tension among the crew. The fog is a sailor's nightmare, hiding hazards and threatening to disorient even the most experienced. You join the watch on deck, eyes straining to pierce the haze. The ship's bells toll steadily, marking the passage of time, but the fog swallows the usual landmarks and the comforting cry of distant gulls. Navigating without clear sight requires skill and trust in instruments, but even those can be deceiving. The captain orders the sounding line deployed, a weighted rope lowered into the water to measure depth. This simple tool can mean the difference between safe passage and running aground on hidden shoals. The crew pulls the line, calling out numbers that you tally and record. The feeling of uncertainty weighs heavily. The sea seems to close in, and every creak of the ship sounds louder. You remember tales of fog ghosts, sailors' eerie stories about spirits that appeared in thick mist, sometimes guiding ships to safety, sometimes leading them to doom. You help with constant adjustments to the sails, reducing their area to keep the ship manageable in case the weather worsens. The wind is unpredictable in the fog, shifting suddenly and testing your balance as you move. Amid the fog, the smell of brine is sharper, mixed with the faint tang of damp wood and rope. The moisture clings to your clothes, chilling your skin despite the physical effort. Historians still argue how medieval sailors managed to maintain direction in dense fog without modern instruments like radar or GPS. Some suggest that ancient knowledge of currents and wind patterns played a crucial role, while others believe it was mostly luck and experience. Suddenly, a shout pierces the silence. A lookout spots a small fishing boat emerging ghost-like through the mist. The two vessels exchange signals, sharing news of weather and currents. These chance encounters were vital for information, connecting isolated ships and helping them adjust their course. You help lower a small boat to send a messenger ashore for fresh supplies, a risky move in the low visibility. The rowers navigate cautiously, their oars splashing softly as they disappear into the fog. Hours pass with little change. The fog begins to thin, revealing glimpses of sun-dappled waves and distant cliffs. Relief spreads through the crew and work resumes with renewed energy. You notice the ship's timbers glistening with moisture, a reminder that medieval ships were constantly battling the elements. Not just wind and waves, but water seeping into every crevice. As the day wanes, the fog fully lifts, unveiling a brilliant sunset painting the sky with golds and reds. The sea calms and the ship sails smoothly into the night. You find a quiet corner to rest, the events of the day sinking into your mind like the fading mist. The sea's moods are unpredictable and merciless, yet the ship endures stubborn and resilient. You drift off the cool night air, whispering promises of calmer seas and new horizons. The pale light of dawn barely penetrates the thick fog clinging to the ship's decks, wrapping everything in a damp, ghostly veil. Your breath rises in little clouds as you pull your worn cloak tighter around your shoulders, the chill seeping deep through your clothes. The morning has a heavy silence, broken only by the occasional creak of timbers and the muted splash of waves against the hull. You can almost feel the sea holding its breath, waiting. Today is a day of maintenance, the kind of hard, gritty labor that keeps a medieval ship alive amid endless threats from the elements. You join the carpenters, their hands steady and calloused, as they inspect the wooden planks lining the hull. The salt water and constant weathering have taken their toll. Cracks, rot, and wormholes threaten to weaken the structure. Every shipworm tunnel is a potential disaster. You help haul heavy oak beams and patches of fresh timber, the wood rough and heavy, smelling of sap and earth. The smell is oddly comforting, a reminder of forests far away and a world rooted in solid ground. The carpenters talk in low voices about their craft, about how certain woods are better for different parts of the ship oak, for strength, pine for flexibility. One carpenter pulls out a patch of wood soaked in a pitch mixture, the sticky black resin acting as a sealant to keep water out. Pitch was a sailor's best friend, and reapplying it was a ritual almost as important as raising the sails. As you work, you notice something strange, tiny flecks of metal embedded in the wood. The carpenter explains that some ships carried iron nails and clamps, but too much iron could attract rust and weaken the hull. Instead, medieval shipbuilders used clever joinery techniques and wooden pegs called tree nails to hold the ship together. Historians still argue whether the widespread use of iron in shipbuilding accelerated only after certain technological advances, or if smaller vessels used mixed materials earlier. Either way, this balance between durability and corrosion was a constant concern. While repairing the hull, you overhear a tale from a seasoned sailor about a ship that survived a month-long storm, okay, by patching holes with canvas soaked in tar and stuffing gaps with oakum, a fibrous material made from old ropes. The story sounds almost mythical, but the practice was real and vital for survival. Later, you help clean the ship's deck, scraping off barnacles and seaweed that cling stubbornly. These growths slow the ship and can damage the hull if left unchecked. The work is exhausting, muscles burning as you wield scrapers and brushes under the blazing sun. You reflect on the paradox of the medieval sailor's life, constant exposure to brutal physical work, balanced by moments of breathtaking beauty. The play of sunlight on the waves, the calls of distant seabirds, and the quiet camaraderie of the crew. As evening falls, the ship's silhouette glows against the setting sun, sturdy and alive, despite the relentless wear of the sea. You're reminded how every plank and nail represents countless hours of sweat and skill, all to keep the vessel afloat. You settle down beneath the sails, the sound of waves lapping, soothing your aching body. The smell of tar and wood mingles with the salty breeze. Your eyelids grow heavy as the ship rocks gently, a living thing sustained by human hands and stubborn will. Sleep arrives quietly, a well-earned reprieve before the next challenge. The horizon glows faintly as the first light of morning creeps over the restless sea, casting a pale golden shimmer on the water. You awaken to the salty breeze brushing against your face, the familiar creak and sway of the ship beneath you. The day ahead promises more of the same. The unpredictable dance with wind and waves, but with a new element, added the challenge of provisioning and rationing, a task as vital as the sails and rudder. The ship's cook, a stout man with a perpetually furrowed brow, gathers a handful of crew members, including you, for the daily ration distribution. Salted meat, hard biscuits known as hardtack, and a dubious amount of water are parceled out with measured care. You learn quickly that food aboard was never abundant or particularly appetizing. The hardtack cracks audibly in your mouth, a dry, dense biscuit meant to last long voyages, but notorious for causing broken teeth and frustration. Salted meat, while flavorful, was often tough and sometimes suspiciously off-color. Fresh food was a rare luxury, almost always consumed within the first days at sea. You notice the cook adding a pinch of something to the stew bubbling in the galley's cauldron, likely herbs or a touch of vinegar to mask the meat's less than fresh taste. This small culinary art was crucial for morale. A better tasting meal could lift spirits for hours. One quirky tidbit you pick up is that some ships carried barrels of beer or weak ale instead of water. The fermentation process killed bacteria, making it safer to drink than stagnant seawater, but it also meant the crew was often mildly tipsy, certainly not ideal for ship handling. Historians still argue how prevalent alcohol was aboard medieval vessels, and whether it was consumed more for safety or for keeping the crew content during long stretches of monotony. As the rationing continues, you overhear the captain discussing the dreaded scurvy, a disease caused by vitamin C deficiency. Symptoms included swollen gums, fatigue, and ultimately death if left untreated. The remedy, fresh fruits and vegetables, was almost impossible to keep on board during long voyages. You recall earlier port visits where onions and garlic were prized commodities precisely because they helped prevent scurvy. But out at sea, such fresh goods quickly spoiled, making scurvy a constant threat. Later, you help scrub the galley, the smell of salted meat lingering in the cramped space. Hygiene aboard was a major concern. Unwashed hands, poor sanitation, and close quarters made illness spread rapidly. Yet, shipboard life often lacked the knowledge or tools to prevent outbreaks. You hear a crew member grumble about the ship's smell, a combination of sweat, salt, smoke, and unwashed bodies that clung stubbornly to clothing and skin. Despite the hardships, humor and resilience keep the crew going. As the sun climbs higher, the ship sails steadily on a fresh breeze. The sea sparkles like scattered gems, and the horizon seems endless. You find a quiet spot to rest the taste of hardtack, still lingering, and let your thoughts drift to the challenges faced by those who sailed centuries ago, surviving not just storms and pirates, but hunger, disease, and boredom. The sea hums its steady song, and you close your eyes, the rocking of the ship rocking you gently toward sleep. The morning sun peeks over the horizon, casting a warm glow on the restless waves. Yet the chill in the air reminds you that the sea is never truly kind. You rise to the steady rhythm of shipboard life, the crew bustling about as sails are adjusted and ropes pulled taut. Today, your focus shifts to the indispensable role of the ship's carpenter, the unsung hero who mends the vessel's bones and keeps it seaworthy through storms and time. You follow the carpenter down below decks into the cramped workshop, a cluttered space filled with sawdust, wooden shavings, and an assortment of tools hanging on rough-hewn walls. The smell of freshly cut timber mingles with the salty air leaking in through the hull's gaps. It's a comforting scent, a reminder of the land far behind you, yet also a symbol of the constant battle to hold the sea at bay. The carpenter pulls out a curved plank, explaining how it's shaped to fit the ship's frame perfectly. Each curve and joint must be precise. A small mistake could weaken the entire structure. This craft was passed down through generations, a blend of art, science, and pure intuition. You learn about the challenges of sourcing quality wood. While at sea, shipwrights had to be inventive, repurposing damaged planks or scavenging from wreckage when possible. Every bit of usable timber was precious. One particularly quirky detail emerges: some ships carried magic charms or inscriptions carved into beams believed to protect the vessel from storms or sea monsters. These superstitions reveal a fascinating intersection of craftsmanship and folklore. Historians still debate how much these beliefs influence shipbuilding practices or crew morale, but the presence of such talismans is well documented. As you work alongside the carpenter, you help reinforce a weakened section of the hull with fresh oak patches hammering wooden pegs called tree nails into place. The physical effort is tiring but satisfying, the tangible progress a stark contrast to the invisible shifting dangers outside. The carpenter shares a story about a ship that survived a devastating hurricane thanks to quick repairs during the storm, a testament to skill, luck, and unyielding determination. Outside, the sea sparkles under the afternoon sun waves, lapping gently as if in gratitude for the ship's resilience. The crew moves with a quiet confidence born from experience, their trust in the carpenter's craft evident. As evening approaches, you find a spot on the deck to rest, the wood beneath you solid and reassuring. The scents of timber and tar mingle with the salty breeze, and the ship feels alive, a living, breathing entity sustained by human hands and endless care. You close your eyes, the creak of wood and steady roll of the sea lulling you toward sleep, ready to face whatever tomorrow's waves bring. The morning mist still clings to the ship as you awaken to a day that feels different, charged with a subtle tension beneath the usual creaks and groans. Today is about the invisible threat that haunted every medieval sailor more than storms or pirates' disease. You feel a cold knot of unease knowing that on a cramped wooden vessel surrounded by endless water illness could spread like wildfire silently and mercilessly. The ship's medic, or more accurately, the barber surgeon, moves through the crew checking the sick and administering remedies. Their toolkit is a mix of oddities, sharp blades, leeches, herbs, and mysterious potions. You watch as the barber surgeon tends to a sailor with swollen joints and fever, classic signs of scurvy or maybe something worse. You learn that medical knowledge aboard ships was rudimentary at best. Many remedies were based on superstition or classical texts rather than science. Bloodletting was common despite its questionable efficacy, and herbs like garlic, onion, and rosemary were used more for their smells than proven healing power. A peculiar detail catches your attention. Some sailors wore garlic necklaces or carried charms believed to ward off plague and evil spirits, blending practical hygiene with superstition. The blend of old world beliefs with desperate medical practice is oddly comforting and terrifying at once. Historians still argue the extent to which medieval shipboard medicine was effective versus harmful, especially considering how diseases like dysentery, typhus, and scurvy devastated crews. You assist in cleaning the sick bay, a cramped and poorly ventilated space overwhelmed by the smell of sweat herbs and unwashed bodies. Sanitation is minimal, water is rationed, and waste disposal is rudimentary, creating a breeding ground for infections. The ship's captain issues strict orders for cleanliness and isolation when possible, but the cramped quarters make true quarantine impossible. You witness the quiet desperation in the eyes of sick sailors, some hoping for recovery, others resigned to their fate. As the sun climbs, you reflect on the resilience required to survive not just the sea, but the invisible enemies lurking within. The ship, despite all its wooden sails, is also a floating hospital, its crew vulnerable in ways they cannot control. By evening, the sickbay is quieter, some sailors resting, others still suffering. You feel a deep empathy and a sense of awe for those who face such conditions with courage and limited means. You lie down on the deck under a blanket of stars, the night air cool and calming. The sea's vastness feels both threatening and protective, a paradox that has defined seafaring since time immemorial. Sleep comes slowly but surely, carrying you away from the hardships into dreams of safer shores. The day breaks with a crisp clarity, the sun casting sharp shadows over the ship's weathered timbers. You join the crew for the daily chore of scrubbing the decks, a monotonous but necessary task to keep the vessel safe and relatively clean. The scent of salt and wood polish mixes with the briny air, and your muscles ache from the repetitive motions. Deck scrubbing might sound dull, but it's one of those jobs that make you realize how much care goes into keeping a medieval ship afloat. Salt water and sea spray coat every surface, and without regular cleaning, decks become dangerously slippery and wood deteriorates faster. You notice that the crew uses sand mixed with water and a stiff brush to scour the planks. The abrasive action removes algae and grime, while roughening the wood's surface to prevent slipping. It's a simple but effective method passed down through generations. One quirky fact you pick up is that some sailors believed scrubbing the deck during certain moon phases improved its effectiveness. A superstition with no scientific basis, but enough cultural weight to influence timing. Historians still debate how much medieval seafarers relied on such rituals versus practical experience, but the blend of the two is a hallmark of life at sea. While scrubbing, you overhear conversations about the upcoming landfall. The crew's excitement is palpable. After weeks at sea, the prospect of solid ground fresh water and fresh food ignites a surge of energy. But approaching shore brings new dangers, reef shifting tides, and hostile locals. The navigators pore over charts and instruments, trying to predict the safest approach. You help haul sails in preparation for slowing down. The ship responds slowly, her great wooden bulk obeying, only after careful maneuvering. As the coastline emerges through morning haze, you spot distant trees and the smoke of small fires, signs of human habitation that spark a mix of hope and caution. The ship's pilot signals to the crew, coordinating the approach. Every step requires precision. Grounding the ship on hidden rocks could be disastrous. You think about how medieval sailors managed without modern aids, relying on keen observation, deep knowledge of currents, and a bit of luck. Once anchored, you assist in lowering small boats to ferry crew ashore. The familiar slap of oars and the scent of fresh earth greet you as you step onto solid ground for the first time in weeks. The relief is immense, but you know that new challenges await: unfamiliar terrain, unpredictable weather, and the need to resupply quickly. You take a moment to breathe deeply, the mix of salt air and woodland scent, filling your lungs, grounding you in the here and now. As the sun climbs higher, you prepare to explore the shoreline, curious about what medieval life ashore looks like compared to the relentless sea. The soft crunch of sand and gravel underfoot marks your first steps on the solid medieval soil after weeks of salty waves and creaking wood. The shoreline stretches before you, a mix of dunes, tangled driftwood, and patches of wildflowers bending in the breeze. The air smells of fresh pine and damp earth, so different from the ever-present brine of the open sea. You join a small party of crew members sent to gather fresh water and supplies from a nearby village rumored to be friendly. The path leads through a dense thicket where the hum of insects mixes with distant bird calls. You notice the intricate patterns of bark on ancient oaks, and the faint glimmer of dew on spiderwebs, reminding you how alive the land is compared to the endless water behind you. Arriving at the village, you're greeted by wary but curious faces. Medieval coastal settlements were often modest clusters of timber-framed houses, smoke curling from thatched roofs and the busy sounds of daily life. Trade was vital, and ships like yours brought not only goods but news and stories from faraway places. You barter for fresh-bred onions and salted fish, marveling at how different fresh food tastes compared to the hardtack and salted meat on board. You sip cool, clear water from a well, the crispness refreshing after so long drinking brackish ship's water. One odd tidbit surfaces during your stay: villagers use a concoction of crushed herbs and animal fat as a rudimentary sunscreen, an early attempt to protect their skin from sunburn, though more likely to attract curious insects than keep the sun away. Historians still debate how widespread such natural remedies were along medieval coasts, given limited understanding of UV damage. While exploring, you hear tales of local legends, sea spirits who protect or punish sailors depending on their respect for the ocean. These myths shape how villagers and sailors alike interact with the sea, blending reverence with fear. As you prepare to return to the ship, the villagers offer you small tokens: dried herbs, woven bracelets as goodwill gestures. These exchanges aren't just practical, but build relationships that could mean life or death in future voyages. Back aboard, the fresh supplies are stowed carefully. The crew's mood lifts noticeably. The promise of real food and fresh water rekindles their strength and spirits. The ship sets sail again, the coastline shrinking behind you. The rhythmic splash of oars and the creak of ropes resume their steady chorus. You settle into your familiar spot on deck, the taste of fresh bread lingering as you watch the sun dip low, turning the sky into a canvas of pinks and oranges. The land behind feels both distant and precious, a reminder of safety amid the endless unpredictability of the sea. You close your eyes, the ship's gentle sway rocking you towards rest, ready to face whatever horizon tomorrow brings. The ship rocks gently under a sky mottled with drifting clouds as you wake to the smell of salty air and wood tar. You notice the crew's low murmurings. Today's task is a difficult one: repairing and maintaining the sails. These vast sheets of cloth are the ship's lifeblood, catching wind and propelling the vessel across the merciless sea, yet they are vulnerable to wear and tear. You make your way to the rigging, the maze of ropes, pulleys, and spars towering overhead like the branches of an enormous skeletal tree. The sailors move nimbly, hands steady despite the dizzying heights. You can almost feel the tension in the ropes, the constant strain from wind and weather that threatens to snap them at any moment. Learning the art of sail repair is humbling. Sail? You watch as experienced hands patch holes with canvas and waxed thread sewing carefully to restore strength without adding too much weight. A damaged sail slows the ship, wastes precious wind, and can endanger the entire crew. One quirky tidbit you pick up: some sailors believed that the sound of sewing on the sails could ward off evil spirits, weaving superstition and practicality into every stitch. It's a small reminder that medieval sailors lived in a world where the line between magic and reality was often blurred. Historians still debate how much these beliefs influenced daily shipboard practices, or if they were simply comforting rituals in a harsh environment. As you work, the wind shifts unexpectedly, tugging at the sails and ropes. You cling tightly, heart racing as the ship heels slightly, the power of the wind reminding you of the sea's unpredictable nature. The ship's navigator calls out commands, coordinating the crew with practiced urgency. You learn that timing and teamwork are everything. One wrong move could send someone tumbling or cause critical damage. After hours of labor, the sails are patched taut and ready to catch the wind again. You descend, muscles sore but satisfied, knowing you helped keep the ship moving forward. As evening falls, the ship glides smoothly beneath a tapestry of stars. The sounds of the sea and the gentle creak of rigging create a lullaby that quiets your thoughts. You find a quiet spot on the deck, the cool air soothing your skin, and let the rhythmic rocking carry you toward sleep. The sails flap softly above you, guardians of your journey through night and storm alike. The last light of day slips beneath the horizon, and the ship settles into a calm rhythm, the sea's endless dark stretching in all directions. You lean against the railing, the cool wood smooth beneath your fingers, and breathe deeply. After all the noise and motion, the creaks and groans, the salt and sweat, this moment feels sacred. An intimate pause between past and future, sea and sky, struggle and rest. The crew moves quietly now, shadows against the fading light, each lost in their own thoughts or the comforting routine of shipboard life. You reflect on everything you've seen and learned, the endless challenges, the grit and humor, the ancient superstitions mingled with hard-earned skill. You remember the hardtack's bitter crunch, the carpenter's patient hands, shaping wood, the barber surgeon's desperate remedies, the fresh taste of bread on shore, and the delicate stitches mending worn sails. Each thread in the tapestry of medieval life at sea, a life that would break most modern souls but forged a unique resilience in those who lived it. One last quirky note lingers in your mind. Some sailors believed that whispering to the sea before sleep could calm its restless spirit, ensuring safe passage. Whether true or not, it's a beautiful thought, a gentle conversation with the vast unknown. Historians still ponder the balance between superstition and survival among medieval sailors, recognizing that both were essential to endure the ocean's endless tests. As darkness deepens, the ship's gentle sway feels like a lullaby. The stars overhead sparkle faintly through a veil of clouds, and the night air hums softly with the pulse of waves. You tuck yourself into a corner, the sounds and scents folding around you like a familiar blanket. Your eyes grow heavy as the sea rocks you into sleep, carrying you toward dreams filled with endless horizons and whispered stories of those who dared to sail before. Sleep comes easily now, peaceful and deep, as the ship and sea keep their timeless watch. Now, to gently close this long voyage, here's a soft wind down for your mind and spirit. The night stretches on a vast, dark ocean of stillness and quiet. Let your thoughts drift slowly like a leaf on a gentle stream, weightless and calm. Imagine the cool night air brushing softly across your skin, the distant murmur of waves fading into silence. You feel your body relax, each muscle releasing its hold, your breathing steady and slow. The vastness around you feels safe, wrapped in a soothing embrace that carries you away from worry or noise. As your eyelids grow heavy, you sense the comforting rhythm of the sea rocking you. Gently, a timeless cradle rocking you toward peaceful rest. Let go completely now. Surrender to the calm and trust that tomorrow the sun will rise again, bringing new light, new hopes, and new stories waiting to be told. Sweet dreams.